o'clock. This is Mark Howell. I'm the chairperson of the Concord Select Board. It is Monday, August 11th, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Okay, so roll call. Mr. McKenna.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Bone.
Here.
Mr. Belli, myself here. Mr. Howell.
Here.
Ms. Hartman.
Here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll begin with public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please approach the podium here in the meeting room or use the raise hand feature if you're on Zoom and wait to be recognized. Public comments are to be 3 minutes long. They are to be on subjects not on the agenda or scheduled for a vote. And so I'll just make the comment right now that if your interest is in the select board actions in response to anti-Semitic and hate incidents, that's agenda item number 9, and we will take some comments on that before we take a vote, if we take a vote. And that, so does anyone have a public comment they'd like to make? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, please.
Well, I move that we approve the consent agenda as published.
I hear a second.
Second.
Any questions? Anybody want to take anything off? No. So we'll need a roll call vote because we are virtual with Mr. McKenna participating remotely.
So that's Mr. McKenna.
Aye. Yes. Proof.
Mr. Bone.
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli here. Yes. Mr. Howell.
Yes.
Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good. And select board appointments.
I have an echo.
I'm
Yeah, there is a.
Yes.
gonna read each of these individually and then we'll. Mark, do you want me to read each of these individually, or should we ask if someone wants to take any of these off for discussion?
So why don't we do that? Does anybody want to consider any of these appointments separately?
I'd like to take number 3 and
And Sussman off?
off for
Okay.
discussion.
Okay,
Okay, we'll discuss that separately. Okay, so I'm gonna make the following 4 motions. I'm gonna move to appoint Romney Olitsky of 264 Bedford Street to the Concord Cultural Council for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. And move to appoint Brian Farber of 41 Ash Street to the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Commission for a term to expire May 31st, 2028. Move to take corrective action on the appointment of Julie Reed of 116 Monument Street to the Board of Registrars for an unexpired term to conclude on March 31st, 2026. And move to reappoint James Littlefield of 523 Bedford Street to the Board of Registrars for a term to expire March 31st, 2028.
Second.
any discussion? Roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. McKinnon,
Aye.
Mr. Boone,
Aye.
Mr. Ravelli, aye. Mr. Howell,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm gonna make a motion to appoint Ann Sussman, 534 Old Marlborough Road to the Concord Housing Development Corp. For a term to expire May 31st, 2028.
Yeah, no, I would second that. Yep.
Discussion, Cam, I know we had some discussion about this last time, and you had had some materials that did not make it into the packet. So what I'm gonna ask is that you summarize the note that you had sent about that, and then we'll include that in along with the minutes of this meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great. So thanks. Look, there's been a lot of diligence that's done here. So I've been working with Julie McClure, who is the new chair of the Housing Development Corporation, and I'm the liaison to the select board. So, we feel like Ann has an extensive background and a really high level of interest in everything that's being done with the Housing Development Corp. She is a licensed architect. She actually, prior to moving to Concord 13 years ago, helped start the Design Review Board in Acton. I've spoken with her pretty extensively. I found her to be very knowledgeable, supportive of affordable housing, finding ways to integrate housing into our communities and lives in a healthy way. For example, looking at how to make things, walkable and very livable. And I think importantly, that Julie, as the chair, has strongly supported her and put forth a recommendation. We also went so far as to get 4 different letters of recommendation from various people within the town who have worked with Anne and are supportive of her committee nomination. So I just feel very strongly that she should be nominated to the CHDC.
Any other discussion?
I'll just comment based on some of the feedback from last week. I did actually also review the West Concord Advisory Committee meetings that were noted in one of the letters. And I do think that having Anne's background is really advantageous, and architect is really valuable on that committee. But I will just say, I did observe her being very confrontational in the committee. And she actually suggested that the developer was unethical in their presentation, which I thought was kind of striking. And it did take the chair as well as a town staff member to intervene to get the committee back on track. So I understand that the chair is supportive of Anne. I am concerned about the committee dynamic. So the background is great, but it's the person who's going to participate in the committee. So as long as the chair and the committee are all on board with this person and are ready to handle that kind of situation, then I guess that is the committee's charge, but I think can be challenging.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, that's fine, Wendy. I mean, I also reviewed the material, the past video recordings.
Yep.
I was
there's
actually there at those meetings.
Go ahead, Mary.
I was actually there at those meetings, so I had the same reaction that Wendy had. But first, what I want to do is I want to thank everyone who sent in a letter or contacted us, the few people who contacted us. And I believe that we all want the same thing here. We want someone on the Concord Housing Development Corporation that can get things done, that looks towards solutions, that wants to work respectfully and cooperatively so that we can help CHDC meet the charge that we've given to them. I am not convinced that this is the right candidate, and I am willing to, I wish we had a larger pool of candidates. I think we could expand our net and get other people before we move forward and decide on this particular candidate. And I would prefer that we do that.
I will just comment one other thing is that I also did see Anne participate and be quite respectful and complimentary of another developer that had presented as part of the meeting. So I saw both sides. So and certainly appreciate all the respondents that's been submitted.
I do too.
Well, yeah, I want to talk about the process here, and it's interestingly, we're going to be discussing APP 10 a little bit later. I think the process here is in terms of vetting candidates, having the chair of the committee interview various candidates, having the select board liaison involved in that. I think we did that well. And I did speak with Julie McClure as a chair. I know her well, and she's very supportive. I think she understands all about this candidate, and she's observed the same thing you have. I think the chair really needs the expertise that Ed Sussman brings, and for me, that's very convincing that the chair and the select board liaison have executed the process, and I think we have to go along with that, or else we're going to be questioning lots of candidates in the future. Now, if we don't go through the process correctly, I think it's well worth discussing it. But I think this has been done very well as far as the process.
Can I make a comment? When I very first started on the select board, and when I watched the select board as a member of the FinCom, the process was pretty much the chair and the select board member brought a candidate, and the rest of the select board pretty much trusted that, just like you described, Paul, that they had done their due diligence and they knew the job. But that has changed, and over the last 2 years, that the select board has taken a much more active role in looking at the process. For example, Cam has asked questions about the process for both DEI appointees and the Task Force Fairness Committee. We've voted against. We've actually taken votes where some of us have opposed certain appointees. So we're in the process of, I think, a change in how active the select board members become in appointees. And it's just the direct, it feels to me that that's the direction that we've taken.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I don't want to debate that. I think just the weight of vetting of this candidate to me has been substantial.
I mean, certainly we've talked about, you know, the process that's been followed and, you know, how we identified candidates and stuff. I would just sort of echo Paul's sentiments here. I mean, we've gone through a really extensive diligence here, both from the chair as well as myself as the liaison. So
I want to appreciate the fact that people have reached out and gotten involved in this, and certainly express gratitude for the amount of volunteerism and the amount of attention that's paid in this community to even things that seem as routine as who we appoint to represent us in certain matters. And I too am strongly inclined to defer to the desires of the committee chair people, and that we appoint and that are elected by their peers to serve on these committees, as well as the liaison from the select board who's involved primarily in working with any given committee. So I think it's always appropriate to have a discussion. In this case, I think that the care has been taken, and I think we're ready to have a vote.
yeah, so I'd like to go ahead then and make a motion.
Yeah.
We made a motion and it's second. Are we ready to?
Yes,
are
we
we
have.
ending discussion?
Yeah, unless
We're done.
anybody has
We're
any
done.
further, we can go ahead and vote.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. McKenna,
To appoint Ann, aye.
Mr. Bone,
Aye.
Ms. Belli, aye. Mr. Howell,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
No.
Okay, that's one, still in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to the chair's report. Yeah. There wasn't an appointment for the Climate Action Committee.
No, there was not.
All right, I saw that on one version of this. Just wanted to check.
You know what?
Are you sure?
Well, I have a piece of paper. Yeah, but I have a half a vote, so let me go to the agenda, the full agenda. Okay.
So just before we leave that all together, it was on the agenda that's posted.
Yeah.
A corrective appointment for Robert Shatton of 116 Indian Spring Road to the Climate Action Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2029.
So moved.
Okay.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Mr. McKenna.
Aye.
Mr. Bone,
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli, aye. Mr. Howell,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So we didn't miss that. Okay, I have a fairly brief chair's report. The next chair's breakfast, which is scheduled virtually a week from Wednesday, so that's August 20th. Will include some, because we're not sure yet, we'll find out in a few minutes, but how the AC at the townhouse is going. But we've preemptively scheduled that virtually, but it's going to include some training on an overview of governance training for committees by the town clerk and the assistant town clerk. And they are also scheduling a planned governance workshop for Saturday, October 18th. So those are good things to keep in mind. This will be training for any chair, any committee member who's serving on subjects like the open meeting law, like procedures for having a clerk and creating minutes and keeping those minutes up to date. So it's really important for our governance that everybody take the time to do this. And we're going to dedicate about 15 or 20 minutes of our next chair's breakfast to that topic, which will be recorded. So if you can't make it live, we can still see that. So, and just a reminder, we're in the process of working on our individual input to the town manager's evaluation, which is due this coming Friday. So just a reminder to the committee members to keep that current. Also, I'd like to encourage attendance at the DEI Commission meeting tomorrow, which is scheduled for Harvey Wheeler at 5 p.m. to 6:30. There'll be a continued discussion of the topic that we're going to cover later around anti-Semitism in the community. We also should be paying attention to the special election. There are some deadlines, including the deadline for registration by mail is tomorrow. The 12th, I think it's noon. Yeah, and so we just want to make sure that anybody who needs to use that form. In the meantime, in-person absentee voting is taking place at the townhouse during normal business hours all week and also on Monday. Those business hours are 8:30 to 4:30 or 12:30 p.m. on Friday. So just in the morning on Friday, also in the morning on Monday. So that the election workers can then prepare for the actual ballots for election day, which is Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. So that's what I had for the chair's report, and now we're going to hear from the town manager.
Thank you and good evening. I do have quite a bit of information for you this evening. I guess I'll start with the AC at the townhouse since you teed that up. So it's not working. It's very warm at the townhouse. The unit itself is here, and right now we're just working through some final contract issues on the install. The work, when it's ready to go, will be done on a Saturday. It's a one-day job, but it needs to be done on a Saturday. So I would say this Saturday or next Saturday is likely, but again, we're just working through some contract issues. The bigger issue at the townhouse right now is parking, and the ability to drive around the townhouse is restricted because of the roof work that's being done at 30 Monument Street, and it's impacting our accessible access to the building. And so that will be the next thing that we will take up in terms of whether or not we can offer any public meeting space while that project is underway. Right now, it's completely blocked. I've been in touch with the property manager, and the project itself over at 30 Monument Street is about a 10-week project because it's a slate roof. It's a big job, but the property manager believes that at some point they'll be able to lift the restrictions off of movement around the building, but I don't have an update on that yet. But I think even when the AC is up and running, we may have another week or two that we're pushing public meetings to other locations to be able to provide accessibility. So we have two reports that we are going to be issuing you on a regular basis. So as we've talked about before, we have transitioned what you've known to be the town manager's reports, which we're now calling Concord Currents, and we are sending out through a subscription service. And if you're not signed up for that, if you go to the town's website on the left-hand side of the homepage, you'll see a communications tab, and under that communications tab, you can see a link to sign up to Concord Currents. So Concord Currents is it's real snazzy. It just went out this afternoon, this edition. We are going to issue this every 2 weeks. Our communications manager would like to be able to issue it weekly. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to be able to do that, but right now we're targeting every 2 weeks. And it's maybe more of a high level, what's going on in town, things to look out for, kind of some summaries of what are happening at key board and committee meetings. There is some information about the special election. Obviously, that's a big topic, and the chair went through kind of those key deadlines. What we have incorporated is some of the things that we have also been sending out to staff internally. So our HR department has done a really nice job on a monthly basis sending out to the whole internal organization, new hires, a picture of the new hire title, and maybe some information about that person. Because as we've talked about many times, we're spread out all over the place, so people don't always have the opportunity to meet staff, new staff particularly, real quick. So again, there's lots of information in Concord Currents. We're starting to add in some hard data. So you'll see that if you're in there, the building division is including information on the number of building permits issued in June and July, residential, commercial, electrical, plumbing, gas, sheet metal. And there's also a note that our interim building commissioner held a roundtable with local builders, architects, and residents to talk about the fossil-free fuel bylaw, the specialized energy stretch code, and some other topics. So we're this on top of having a lot of good information, it looks good, which is nice. So we're happy to receive feedback on that. But what I wanted to talk to you about is this new town manager's project update that we've included in the packet. This is the first draft, first time we've done this. This is going to be a monthly report, so you'll have it probably in your first meeting of the month. We do have a template we're working from. We are highlighting 10 key projects, and then we have some information on some other projects that are ongoing. So in the currents, you might see things that are, quicker turnaround. The projects that are in here, these are our long-term projects. These are tied to select board town manager goals and objectives. And on the second page of the report where we have the summary, you'll see that we've identified the projects by department, what the project is, what the status is, whether it's in process, it's out to bid, we're in the planning phase. We have target completion, the estimated cost, alignment with town manager and select board goals. These right now are pointing towards fiscal 25. They're not yet pointing towards fiscal 26. Who the internal lead is, and then a risk assessment. And we've categorized these projects as high, medium, or low. So if a project is identified as low risk, it's likely well along in process. The risk we're keying in on, is there a risk to timeline or budget impact? So some of these, like the Doug White Field, we are nearly at the end of that. We've identified that as a low risk. And then we have the project right underneath that, the Baker Ave culvert repair. We've identified that as a higher risk because that project, it's out to bid. We don't yet know what the number of bidders, the successful bidder. We have to work through that process. We don't, we have an internal estimate for that project, but the bids could come in high. And we might not have any bids, right? I mean, this is not likely, but that's what would make something a high risk. And then we've got some information just with a little bit of a background on each of these projects. There are a couple of edits that we need to make. For instance, in the fire department, the ambulance transition from basic to advanced. I see the target completion in the narrative is showing as January 2026. It's July 2026 for operational. Somewhere else in the report, it was showing July, but so there's some editing to do here. But we are definitely looking for feedback on this. I'm hoping this is something that you can keep with you, and maybe as you're receiving emails from residents, this will be a handy guide. This is a public document. It's available in the packet. We probably will post it separately on the website as well. So I have that. I have a couple of other things, but I can pause for a moment in case there are any questions.
That is really a great thing.
I agree.
It's
Yeah.
exactly what we need to sort of stay on track of around the things. The one comment I would make, I think it's great that all these projects are in progress. If there was some way to under construction or something that's a little bit more clear that that's the actual execution phase of the project, or would be super helpful, but overall, the information is concise, it's in one place. The project manager and me is all aflutter.
Now we just have to make it look better. We did at our senior management team meeting this morning, we have weekly meetings. We talked about this and the need for common understanding of the terminology that we are using. And so I appreciate that feedback as well. So the
question.
Sure.
I'd also like to say that I think this is great. I loved seeing the schedule here in our packet, and I think it's exactly what we should be looking at. So thank you for that. I have a question about, well, two things. Number one, I see that the Munis conversion is not in the first matrix. It's in your second ongoing project matrix. And I'm wondering if it should be up above, because it seems to be an ongoing project that I frankly don't know a lot about, and yet I feel like it's been ongoing since.
yeah.
And I think having updates on where that's at would be helpful to me.
Yeah. So this piece that's here, and I know it's not particularly clear. So Munis financials is up and running. Munis payroll is up and running. The next piece is Munis HCM, the human capital management. And that's what this piece is. And I think we will be talking about this at the personnel board meeting this week, if anybody is interested in tuning into that. But that's what this is, the last module that we're looking to bring on, and it's.
I'm sorry, tell me again. So financial management has been done.
We
been
went live with
completed,
that October 2023.
And go ahead.
Payroll live right around July 1
Okay.
of this year. And then this HCM, I think we're looking at somewhere between December of this year and early spring.
What about procurement? Is
That's part of the financials.
And that's gone live a long time ago. You said
We're
October
using
2023?
the procurement with that was part of the October 2023, as was tax, receivables, everything related to
Is
financials.
the intention of the schedule for us to ask questions about it, ask for updates, or is it information only?
Well, it's the first time, so we're working on it. I think it's appropriate for us to have dialogue with the town manager about the status of the projects.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think if you're interested in updates on anything, I mean, it'd be good to pull from here, and if you want something on Munis, we certainly can work that into the schedule.
Great.
So just quick, are there any projects that aren't on this list? Has there been this triage and this all projects?
There are projects that are not yet on the list.
You know,
And so just because of the timing of when
is there some criteria or threshold for project being on here, dollar amount or? Curious.
yes.
Yes.
But I don't have any more specifics. I think, we had some people, some departments that were ready to submit within the timetable and some that are still working. So I think it's going to take us probably 3 months before we get
Sure.
everything in, and then we can talk about the thresholds, if the thresholds are not producing the information that you want to see.
I think it's a great start.
Can I just?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Can I
Tim.
just add one quick thing? So I really, I like it. I think it's a great start as well. On the status sort of in progress, and I mean, it's going to maybe tie in with the risk too, but it's always good for me to know in my mind, like whether we're on track or behind. It's in progress. Great. But are we, have we met the sort of deliverables, the interim deliverables we think, and we're, cooking along, or is there a slowdown and, we're sort of off track.
Yeah. Yes, so we can incorporate that in as
It's just
well.
a thought. It's just a thought, Carrie. That's all. Because then the risk sort of, I think you're trying to capture a couple of different things in the risk. So on the one hand, you're sort of trying to capture like timing risk, but it's also sort of described as like the impact or almost kind of like the magnitude of the project. So it might be just helpful to sort of have status focus on, is it on time, off time, on track or not, and then risk sort of, what if it, what would happen if it doesn't get delivered?
Yeah,
Well, I thought it was helpful that there's a further on page that has the briefs on it.
Yes.
So there's a lot more room there, but this is great. I'd encourage anybody that's interested in what we're talking about to take a look at the select board packet, page 17.
okay, and one, actually just a couple of quick things. I wanted to mention, because I'm not sure that we've mentioned it, the new director of the Regional Housing Services Office started at the end of last month on July 28th. Her name is Kristen Gouchard, Gouchard, and she's coming to us from the town of Acton. So we're happy to have her on board. I wanted to mention that we are still under a level 1 water restriction, and we are asking all residents to be mindful of that. We are anticipating activating NAGOG sometime this week. And so I wanted to mention that. Let's see. We did have a public safety incident at Walden Pond yesterday afternoon where we had a near drowning. And I just wanted to remind everyone that there are no lifeguards on duty this season, and to be careful when swimming in the pond. And we did have a pretty large outage yesterday, electric outage. And by that, I mean, we had about 750 customers that were out. That represents, I don't know, something around 8% or so of our customer base. I think I probably sent that out in the email yesterday, which I don't have in front of me. But we have had a couple of outages, or we've had 4 outages between July 31st and yesterday. And so CMLP Director Jason Bulger put together some information that we sent out yesterday through news and notices, understanding recent outages, because there have been different reasons for each of the outages, but certainly we understand that any outage, particularly this time of year, it's difficult and it's impactful to residents. So there's some information that is available on the web talking about the causes for each of the 4 outages we've experienced, and then what our approach is to preventing outages. So talking about investments in infrastructure, vegetation management, improving technology, and then limiting the scope of the outages where we're looking at adding different hardware to the network in order to limit when there is an outage, to limit it or to isolate it to a smaller number of customers. So I hope that information is helpful, and we're certainly available to answer any questions on that. So thank you very much.
Thought that communication was also really useful on, top 10 squirrels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and trees, which are obviously stressed because of the drought that we're having. So it's all interrelated, but it's great that we're keeping track of that. Any further questions for the town manager from the board? I'll just mention that for those of you that may still have a road trip in your summer, Civic Concord will accompany you. I've listened to several of the episodes. We have a rather shy host who never seems to introduce herself when she starts the show. But other than that, I have no criticism. So I just encourage you to, wherever your local podcasts are, you can take Concord meetings with you and get a lot of the information that we're going to talk about, or background on a lot of the information we'll be talking about here, including the roads program and MCI are among the episodes that are out there. Anything else? Okay. The next item on the agenda, item number 6, is being postponed at the request of the applicant. That is the public shade tree removal, so we're not going to discuss it. There's going to be some more information collected from an arborist, hopefully to support our future deliberations on that. So the exact date of that is still to be determined. So we're going to move on to item 7, which is the overview of the wastewater treatment plant discussion and the request for an extension of negotiations with the Division of Capital and Asset Management. I think we're going to hear from Alan and Weston and Sampson. And
is this speaker available or I don't know if it's on?
that's the microphone.
Will it work?
Leave it on the table, yeah.
So we can hear, you can hear us. Okay, great. Yeah, I think we're good. No, we have a.
You're good.
Ready?
So, just a quick introduction. Again, Alan Cathcart, Director, Concord Public Works. Been working on wastewater issues for many, many years. Fortunately, our consultant that we've been working with, Weston and Sampson, is well represented. Kent Nichols is one of the senior members at Weston and Sampson, and he's been working on Concord wastewater issues since the late 1990s. So he's very familiar with the wastewater, treatment challenges we've had, especially on the capacity and long-range management strategy. We retained Kent and his team services to evaluate the MCI wastewater treatment plant with consideration of its existing conditions. We're starting to explore what we may be able to do sort of in the future with that facility. We've also asked them to look at infrastructure and potential connectivity to our existing system as part of sort of a broader interest. And so they did a lot of assessment in a very short period of time. We're pleased to say utilizing the state funds to do that, which was very advantageous. And with that, Kent, I'll sort of hand it over to you to walk the.
Sure. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah.
We did give little background information. It was in the packet.
Yeah.
I guess you're putting it up on the screen for the folks at home. Just by way of background, we're talking about wastewater in Concord. Primarily right now, your wastewater in Concord is limited to what you can treat either in an on-site system, which is the majority of folks in Concord, or if you're on sewer, lucky enough to be in sewer, live either downtown or in West Concord, you're served by the sewer system. All that wastewater right now goes to the treatment facility out on Bedford Street. That facility is limited to 1.2 million gallons a day capacity. And historically, and at least for those past 25-ish years that Alan mentioned that we've been doing this wastewater planning, the town's been kind of bumping up against that available capacity. So this is a limited resource. It's kind of hard to get people to really understand why it's a limited resource, and there's a lot of background to that. But essentially what we're limited by is the treatment facility is limited by its discharge permit, which is issued by the EPA and allows the discharge of the treated effluent. It's treated to a very high degree. It's very pure, but it still gets limited in how much we can put back out there at the end. And flip the slide. Over time, the treatment facility, we've been struggling with how do we address this issue? And the one thing that you can note on this graphic is you can see that green line is where we've been flow-wise versus the pink line, which is what you're allowed to treat and discharge. And you can see every once in a while you're up against that limit, you peak up over it. It's pretty close. Mostly what happens is in a wet period, flows go up. Tends to happen frequently. In a dry period like this that we're in right now, your flows are down. So right now you don't really have a limitation there. Over time, we've looked at other options for this facility, and there have been studies of the facility, including the facility plan that was prepared in 2024, that looked at what has to happen just to modernize and keep the facility running. Because these facilities, all wastewater facilities, run 24/7. They run in bad conditions and good, and the facilities have a tendency to wear greatly over time. So they need constant renovation and upkeep. We did, as part of the planning, look at a number of different ways to restore capacity in your system. Notably, we looked at groundwater discharge at this site, and that's been something that we've had on the table and pushed off to the side. That's kind of the background with your wastewater treatment facility, if you flip the slide. We more recently have had the opportunity, Concord's been given the opportunity to look at the MCI Concord wastewater treatment facility. So we did an evaluation of that last year, looked at what the town might get out of that plant, what the plant is looking like in this condition. That plant is a little different, significantly smaller facility, treats and discharges up to 310,000 gallons a day. Currently, with the MCI facility mostly shut down, there's only a couple of adjacent properties that go into that. It's currently seeing something on the order of 65,000 gallons a day of wastewater. And that facility is permitted to discharge to the river as the main Concord plant is. Has not previously been assessed for groundwater discharge, but that's one of the things we were interested in looking at as well. As I said, we did an evaluation of this facility in 2024. We returned that back. We've had prior discussions with this group. I think everyone's pretty well aware. The big news is that while the facility is functional, it has had a lot of deferred maintenance. Because of that deferred maintenance, there's a cost to renovate that plant. It's not surprising that plants that are old need significant renovation costs. In this case, you need to spend about, in our opinion, somewhere on the order of $25 million to renovate that plant. Because you've got some shared use of that plant, even going forward with some state facilities, we have recommended that that be something that is evaluated for kind of some shared costs, particularly with the state, so that we can find some outside sources of cost from the state. We flip the slide. The next thing, I'll talk a little bit about some of the more recent things we've been doing in the beginning of 2025. We just recently completed an evaluation of the potential to do groundwater discharge on the MCI Concord site. There are a number of sand beds that very historically were used for either disposal of sludge and disposal of effluent way back history of this plant, because the MCI plant has gone through a lot of different kind of incarnations over time. Our evaluation basically looked at the groundwater conditions and what could happen in the hydrogeological realm if we put water into the ground. Surprisingly, because we kind of weren't sure, because the site doesn't lie very, it's pretty low lying. It's not very high. It's usually a question of how much separation we can get to groundwater and what the soils are when we look at this type of thing. And what we did find is actually the site is better than we anticipated based on that analysis for these conditions. We do feel logically that we can get somewhere on the order of 100,000 to another 150,000 gallons a day of additional flow into the ground on the site if necessary. It could be more. We did run numbers in that modeling up to 300,000 gallons a day of capacity, which is good. And so we're prepared to talk about that. It's just for discussion at this point. We do need to do some more evaluation. There's two things I would mention that are notable. One is, if you were to do this, you'd need to spend some additional money beyond that 25 million that we talked about, because the cost to develop those beds is significant. So we've marked maybe about a $3 million additional investment. That would include the bed construction and the distribution system, plus some additional minor modifications at the plant to deal with some permit differences between the surface discharge and the groundwater discharge. One thing of note here, the old sand beds at the MCI Concord site actually extended quite a bit to the south of the current sand bed location, well onto the property that is currently the Junction Village parcel. In fact, more than half of that sand bed area was actually on the parcel that was conveyed to Junction Village. We have not yet assessed that part, but there was a separate study that looked at some potential to put a groundwater discharge to groundwater for wastewater on that site. So that's a TBD that's still up there.
There's sand beds under what's now the solar panels, right?
Yeah, the
No,
solar
okay,
panels
just want
are
to be-
on top of some of the old beds. They did kind of level them off. There's also more that are kind of buried when you get onto the Junction Village parcel. They kind of filled them over time. They didn't need them all. They stopped using them for the original purposes. So over time, they filled them with material. So a lot of the ones that, if you go back to some of the historic photos, you can see they went all the way. They went quite a bit further south than you see them now. It's kind of hard to see. These ones you see in this picture, you can still see. The surface indications get lesser and lesser as you go south.
Can you tell me, do you have an estimate for the gallons per day you might get if you included the Junction Village property?
So we think there's a couple of limitations that don't change much. One of those limitations is we can limit the amount of mounding that happens, how much the groundwater level rises when we put the water in the ground by spreading this out more. It's likely that we would gain a little bit, but we wouldn't gain that much more. What we would gain is we'd be able to mitigate that mounding effect by spreading it further north to south. We probably wouldn't use all of that area. We just make a longer vertical alignment so that we could make that mounding effect less. Nominally, I would expect we would get, 30 to 50% more if you were trying to pick a number. But we'd have to really model that to see. We have not at this time done any evaluation in detail of discharging onto the junction ditch. So that would be
Oh, I thought you said.
that would be a future,
preliminary.
that would be
I
a future
misunderstood.
thing you'd have to
I
do.
misunderstood.
We do
Okay.
expect it to be some increase, but
Yeah.
what we'd actually rather have access to that if it became possible. It would help us to mitigate some of that groundwater mounting effect and make the process loose.
And you've been talking about two types of discharge. One is surface water discharge,
Yep.
which we're doing now, and potentially groundwater discharge. Can you explain the regulatory differences and the oversight and the
Yeah.
connections between the two?
Yeah, there's a key regulatory difference. Massachusetts is one of only 3 states in the nation that are still regulated directly for surface water discharges by EPA. All the other 47 states handle it internally at state level. So Massachusetts, NIPD's permits, NPDES permits, that is the permit that governs surface water discharges for wastewater treatment facilities, are actually issued directly by EPA region. The state, through Mass DEP, issues a parallel permit or water quality certification permit that kind of parallels that. But the primary permitting agency for a surface water discharge is the US EPA. Groundwater discharge is the opposite. Groundwater discharge permits are not the purview of EPA, they're the purview of Massachusetts DEP, and they're issued solely by Massachusetts DEP at this time. Now, there's a lot of conversation about that at different levels nationally that can go a lot of places.
Even within those agencies, there are different groups
Yeah,
within Mass DEP and EPA, the groundwater surface water.
yeah, and they historically have communicated periodically better some years than others. It depends on the year and what's happening with the nature of who's in there, but generally they're kind of separate permitting processes. Obviously, Massachusetts, the ones issued by Massachusetts DEP, there's a little more local control over those. So it gives you some advantages in doing. I would say, having helped a lot of communities get and individual applicants get groundwater discharge permits, we kind of know the rules with groundwater discharge permits. The primary difference that you should probably be aware of is if you were going right now in Massachusetts for a new surface water discharge under the EPA, it doesn't happen. There's no provisions even right now for increasing that. That was one of the options we looked at. Historically, we fought that battle a lot. It doesn't happen. Groundwater discharge permits are issued every day by the state. They're readily available. They can still be issued. So there's a limit to kind of what you have on the table for options. That's one of the reasons we look at them for these facilities. So.
Can I ask one additional question? These sand beds get really close to the riverway to Aspet here.
Yep.
Would it have to come in further now because regulations have changed over the years?
We wouldn't use them as they are.
Yeah.
We would actually
Reconstruct.
construct, I think the proposal for this would most likely be subsurface. These were actually set up. If you've been by the sulfactant plant, there's a bunch of open beds right along that. I forget what the street is there that runs up, but if you just go a little bit west of West Concord here into sulfactant, that's an open sand discharge, and they have open beds where they discharge effluent. This would actually be probably more likely constructed like a backyard septic system, where the infiltration system is below grade. What you'd see on the surface is just lawn.
Okay.
Maintained.
But it would be the same area, even though it's.
Probably the same area. We'd probably try to keep it a little further from the stream,
That's
from the
where I was
river here.
going. Yeah, right.
It's,
Yeah.
we wouldn't use anything close to the riverbank. Those ones probably still need a little bit of maintenance and protection as that area kind of continues to naturally reclaim.
Yeah.
But if you look out there, there's a lot of vegetation that's kind of already started to naturally reclaim those. It's really not suitable to try to go too close to
I
that.
don't think so.
Have you looked at groundwater discharge possibilities at the main plant,
Yep, we actually did an extensive look at that, Alan, 10 years ago, maybe. It's getting close.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
even beyond.
and we actually went through the process up to the point of getting kind of pre-approval from DEP. They approved the hydrogeo analysis that said we could get X amount in the ground. But the next step, the challenge at the main plant, the next step would be to kind of do a little bit more engineering on the side of what the facility can do. And there's a little bit of an intricacy with groundwater discharge. There's a presumption that when you discharge to the groundwater in the state of Massachusetts, that there's a potential that that groundwater could be used in the future for some resource. So there's a resource protection threshold for nitrogen in this case, which is a big concern for drinking water. Because the current Concord plant treats to a very low level for phosphorus, but doesn't actually remove total nitrogen. We would have to modify the process significantly at that plant to do this.
And what kind of capacity do we get at the main plant, the groundwater discharge?
It's 155,000 gallons a day.
For those 5 sand beds.
wouldn't
Yeah,
use
we
all.
wouldn't use all, we couldn't use all, but we did the study to maximize what's the, you know, the largest volume, and we had 155,000 gallons. I think as Kent mentioned, there's, I like to tell people there's a flow and a load. Load is the nutrients. And so, you know, what's interesting is the balance. The load is a nutrient issue up at our existing facility, but the loading is pretty good. There's such a good offset when you go up there between where discharge in Great Meadows and along the Assabet. He mentioned the mounding is really the regulatory threshold that we'd be, you know, sort of having to monitor to figure out how would we discharge to the ground and not upset a mounding limit by the river itself. So it's kind of the
What's that land being used for now?
presently it's reserve. We've just kept it available for in the event it's an emergency or we have no other option. We
So
know
It's vacant?
it's vacant, yeah. If you
Nothing's
look at the
there.
aerial photos, you'll see
Okay.
these interesting
Bed.
open beds.
Yep.
I will say, if you went back into the 50s, you'd see more of those beds. When we did a major upgrade in the 80s, we eliminated some. So it's interesting to see people have gone away from those sand filters to other processes, clarifiers, clear thickeners, things like that.
Thank
I think we should probably.
Yeah, let's jump. So we did a couple of other things this past spring. We completed investigation of the existing collection system on MCI. This was kind of one of the big surprises we got, which is, we tried to do TV inspection of the lines. That report's been issued for the town. What we found is it was actually not even possible to inspect some of the lines because they're in such poor condition. The existing sewer system that serves the existing buildings, even the buildings that will remain connected, is in very poor. So the big notable thing here is there's gonna need to be some reinvestment on the pipeline work. And notably, these pipelines don't do anything discrete for the town of Concord or your future development. These are existing state properties. So the vision would be, this is a good place where the state should be kind of putting some money in to renovate that system and make it usable.
So just so people know what they're looking at, they're seeing an aerial view of MCI Concord with the red and green lines indicating the sewer lines that go to the Northeast Correctional Facility.
Yep.
And the state police and Mass DOT facility.
Yeah, and the red lines are ones we couldn't get a camera into. The green lines are ones we could actually successfully camera. That green line off at the kind of upper left corner of the picture keeps running up the hill to the farm property.
And that's crossing right under Route 2.
And then the last slide here, the last thing we did in the spring was we looked at the potential to divert flow. The big question is if we were to get this capacity in line at the MCI site, none of Concord's current flows actually end up on the site. So you'd be able to serve the future development in the existing properties, but what would we do to kind of make best use of that? And the proposal that we kind of came up with was a couple of options to divert flows from the existing Concord sewer system up to this site for treatment. And the goal by doing that would be to give you the best flexibility level that you possibly could in being able to use the capacity for at each site, at both the Bedford Street site and at the MCI site, and use them most efficiently so that you could make best use of the capacity regardless of where a new connection would come in. Maybe it would come in downtown here, you'd still have the ability to divert flow and make use of that capacity. And again, we came up with some costs, probably a couple of $1 million to do that diversion, and probably should be figured into the equation at some point in time.
With some land access issues and things like that, you know, this isn't just under our sole authority. We'd have to be working with some property owners.
A couple of logistical challenges. There's a report available on that as well. So And then obviously the big question going forward is there's a lot of next steps that still need to be done. If we do want to pursue the groundwater discharge, we do have to have some conversation with a number of different parties about treatment. If you want to wrap in consideration of the Junction Village parcel, I think the Housing Development Commission should be involved deeply in that. And there's still a number of other details to work out there. We do need to continue to do flow planning. That's part of an ongoing effort that we had already started here for the town to kind of come up with what this would be. But additional things like advancing the flow diversion study, deciding what we want to do for total flow capacity and how to make that all available is important. And then maybe most notably, capital planning is very much a need. There's a lot of costs that we've talked about here. There's a lot of options for how we make those costs line up with revenues. And we have quite a bit more work to do to kind of both tease out what you might be able to get further for support from outside sources, and also what you would develop for internal allocation approaches to use things like your current rates, your sewer improvement fee, and other things to generate some of that capital. A lot of work still to do.
And phasing, we need to sort of, not everything's gonna happen at the same time. We have to look over a 5-10 year period where it be fully sort of realized.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
It's obviously there's a lot of work that's been done, and the opportunities, of course, are to provide some relief to the ability to actually do any additional hookups as we are at capacity, as the first slide showed. And so the action that's before us at the moment is that we are in need of an extension for negotiating the possible acquisition of the MCI wastewater treatment facility from the state. And Megan, I believe you're ready to talk to us about that.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yes. So I think, you've heard about some of the work that we did this spring with Weston and Sampson, and I think a little later you'll hear about some of the other work that we did with agency and the MCI advisory board. And we're so grateful for the state earmark that allowed all of, this work to happen. So with that, when the governor first planned to close the prison, in the budget language, she put language to offer this wastewater treatment plant to the town of Concord. And so as you've just heard, analysis has been underway. We've had discussions with DCAM, we're, in regular communication with them. And but we did have some deadlines on this to make sure, we were kind of obligated to check back in and make sure we're moving things forward. And so, there was an initial deadline to respond to the offer, which we met. And then, both of the letters are in the packet here. We responded with our town council, and now, it's time to respond and say, we need a little bit more time. We can extend the terms on mutual agreement. So I did draft a letter for your consideration. I vetted it through town council, who thought it was acceptable. And I have spoken with DCAM, and they would be expecting this, or a letter to request it about a year. They are comfortable with that time frame. So, at this point, I'm happy to take any questions, and if you have any thoughts on the draft before you.
Did you say they are comfortable with the timeframe, the August 2026 timeframe?
They thought that, given the analysis that we've done and the more that we need to have done,
Yep.
A year it sounds about right to
Great.
ask to
Good.
extend it.
Okay.
So
That was my question. Good.
We've shared all of the information on the technical side that Weston Sampson's done with them, so they have this
Great.
data.
Great.
And it's fair to say that they didn't have a lot of this information about the details of the plan.
They had an independent assessment engineer evaluate it, and it was sort of, it was consistent. Not with their collection system, the detail we had, but the treatment facility was not a surprise to them.
So my understanding is the last letter went out from our town council. And that seems perfectly appropriate to me. And so I figured that was one of your questions.
yeah, so I drafted this and posed it to town council. Who should this be from? Last one was from town council. It could come from the select board. It could come from the town manager. And he thought, any of those bodies is appropriate. So I defer to you all, what your preference is. If you're comfortable with the language, if it should come from yourselves or.
Started with legal counsel, so I'm fine with keeping it that.
Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling.
Yeah, I'd stick with what works. If it worked in the past. Or is
Yeah,
it-
I think that makes sense. I think that, we are looking forward to particularly this aspect of there are, as, and we're going to hear from the chairs of the MCI advisory board on that status, but there are three things that keep on coming up: wastewater treatment, the disposition of Route 2, and the possible remediation needs of the site as risks. And this one is, as we've heard tonight, is complicated, but there's considerable opportunity of spelling out almost 35 to 40% over our existing capacity if this could be brought online, understanding that it has some customers that come with it today. So I think it's an opportunity that we should pursue as a town, and I appreciate the state's willingness to work with us to get it. So we need to take a vote.
A motion?
Yes.
All right, I move that to approve the extension of negotiation with DCAM regarding the MCI Concord wastewater treatment plant through August 2026.
Your second?
Second.
Any further discussion? We'll take
Okay,
a
we
roll.
need a roll call. Mr. McKenna.
Aye.
Mr. Bohm.
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli, aye. Mr. Howell.
Aye,
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
Okay, Holland.
thank you.
Thank you.
Alan. Thank you, Ken.
Before you, I just have a question. So, on the next steps, I mean, there are lots of variables here. The MCI's in and around. When do we turn that into sort of a plan, budget plan?
You're gonna hear about that next.
No, not the MCI, but
Oh,
just wastewater in general. And because there are investigations, there's sand beds, there's even without MCI.
Yeah, so we're going to be getting a proposal from Weston and Sampson, which will outline sort of the plan of work that they recommend. At that point, we'll be sort of evaluating to determine if that's really what works. I know we have back and forth conversations with DCAM, so we'd want to keep them apprised of what we're doing and why. But I think the next step is going to be literally continuing to work with our consultant. At this point, there are no funds from the state. There may be some. It's sort of, we know there's $250,000 that may be released halfway through the fiscal year if funds are there. But we'll probably be working through the sewer improvement fund to do some of this capacity development.
So would there be a backup plan without MCI for?
We
capacity?
do not have. This is the best option we have. The backup plan presently is that 155,000 gallon relief valve at a significant cost. I assume it costs about $10 million. That's our backup plan right now.
Or renegotiating the permit?
You continue to renegotiate the permit. We've run into a buzzsaw when we went into.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great.
Okay. Our next agenda item is a quarterly update on the MCI advisory board from co-chairs Dan Gainsborough and Patrick McCurdy. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. That's a tough act to follow. So, I guess what I would want to share with you a couple of things, and Patrick will jump in as well. We are focused right now on, as I think everybody knows, we completed what was a sprint and a great outcome. We have a good report. We have, I think, done a good job of reaching out to the community and making sure that they understood the work that we were doing. And so we want to continue to build on that momentum. It's really important to us is to keep
making progress on our work. And so one of the first things we really need to do is to coalesce around a particular scenario. You may or may not remember, we sort of arrived at 3 scenarios that sort of run a little bit of a continuum from the most community sort of municipal benefits to the most probably financially beneficial to the town in terms of fiscal impact. So I think it's highly likely that some sort of a hybrid option will arrive, and we're focused on that as a committee between now and beginning of early September. And recognizing that there are still a number of pretty significant unknowns, I think the board felt comfortable about us essentially putting a stake in the ground and making some informed assumptions and try to develop a scenario around those. And because information is going to continue to flow out from these different investigations, whether it's the wastewater treatment plant or the Route 2 redesign, and as Mark alluded to, even understanding what's going on in the site and more in depth. In addition to that, we are aware of the efforts that are going on relative to the land use working group. And so we have, in coordination with Sven and Alan, we've decided it would probably be beneficial for us to do a joint meeting, which is coming up a week from today in the afternoon. And so we're looking forward to that and just trying to understand our mutual objectives. Third point is we're going to continue to do the community outreach because that was one of our critical tasks, and it is a lot of information for people to digest and understand. And so our community outreach subcommittee is in the process of scoping out what the various approaches to how to continue to build on that success. And so once we have an understanding of the scope we're expecting, we'll probably come back to you guys and work. Megan is working with us as well, trying to refine that budget and ask for our approval to proceed with that. There are some quick tasks that one of which I think is a really great one, which is to take what is admittedly a very large volume of information. It's on the order of just about under 100 pages in the executive summary. And then in addition to that, there's about 500 pages, I think, of addendum. So we're going to try to come up with a 1-page or so document that hits on all the highlights that we can then circulate around to our group of almost 100 stakeholder groups. Then once we have our understanding of the preferred, or once we coalesce around a preferred scenario, we can begin to our process of the zoning process and land use regulations. And so that is a top order business, and we're hoping it's probably very ambitious to think that we would be ready for our town meeting next year, but we also are allowing for the possibility of a special town meeting, you know, if we can expedite it. Do you want to comments?
I think you covered it well, Dan. I would only add that, you know, we continue to be in regular dialogue with DCAM. So I think a productive and constructive relationship there. As Dan mentioned, needing to coalesce around a scenario from the town's perspective to then be able to more constructively move the dialogue further, to engage with them with what the town's recommendation is, to effectively elicit a reaction and be able to build from there to then have a more definitive perspective on, you know, a timeline to move through the process, which, as you all know, is a multi-year endeavor. So those dialogues are very much ongoing and active with them on a weekly or bi-weekly basis at the latest.
And then, in terms of the Route 2 redesign, rotary redesign, we have an arrangement right now with the DOT, Department of Transportation, where we're meeting quarterly. Last meeting was, remember, Megan, when I think it was in July or something? Yeah, July. And so that was a very productive meeting and also enlightening. They I'm probably not going to say anything that's going to surprise anyone, but they work at a slightly different pace. Their view of what's fast and what ours is probably pretty different. That said, I think there was a lot of value in that meeting in that we shared our scenarios, and I think they very much appreciated that and understand how whatever happens, understand better whatever may happen in terms of a development program on the MCI site, that certainly could have a significant impact on how the redesign of Route 2 happens. So we'll continue that. And I think it was great to just sort of have that conversation with them. So happy to try to answer questions.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that update, and thank you for the work you did, especially I agree the outreach was particularly well done. I thought that was great. My ears really perked up when I heard, Patrick, when you say timeline, because that's something that I've been thinking about for a while. And I just want to go back to how this all unfolded for a minute, just to kind of get us grounded, especially around how we work, how the work between the MCI Advisory Board and the Land Use Working Group is going to integrate together, okay? Ideally, I think we would have had the Land Use Working Group start working before the MCI Advisory Board, but it didn't work like that because we had the money for the MCI Advisory Board. So that got going, and it was basically focused on one parcel of land. And so, you guys did what we asked you to do, and you did it really well. Okay, but we do know, though, that there are other things happening within the town that certainly are going to impact some of the decisions that you make. We also learned tonight that we're hoping that we can get DCAM to agree to wait until August before we have a wastewater treatment plant agreement, which is a pivotal thing to all of our work, your work at the Land Use Working Group. So we already know that we're waiting until August to get some really important information. So the question becomes, what do we do? What should we be doing between now and that? And how do we coordinate? So I was hoping that we could put together a timeline that, again, integrates the work between the Land Use Working Group and the MCI Advisory Board. And one of the things that's kind of the elephant in the room when the Land Use Working Group and the MCI Advisory Board talk is the disposition of the DPW site. So I know that the MCI Advisory Board looked at their parcel and they wanted to maximize revenue, and municipal uses wouldn't match that goal. So that kind of made municipal uses not as attractive. And yet, certainly we know that given all the other things that are happening in town, it might be a good idea to in fact put DPW there. I don't know yet, so that it unlocks an opportunity somewhere else to meet the town's revenue goals. So that's the work of the Land Use Working Group. So the question becomes, how do we effectively integrate and get our work to go together? You mentioned that you wanted to put a joint meeting together. And I guess I'm wondering, what would the work be? I think we need something in front of us before we just have those two bodies come together. What would we, I'm hoping that we would have something, ahead of time, like a timeline or some decision points that we would have to make jointly that I'm not sure can be made with two large bodies but I'm open to ideas.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mary. In terms of the format, to kind of maybe address that, last part of your question, I think we're open to, whatever the right forum is, because you're right, getting two groups of 12 plus folks together is probably not an ideal format. I think we'd be very flexible as to, getting that group down to something that can actually, have a small group discussion and probably move to outcomes.
Great.
In terms of what the content would be, I think there's a perspective from the advisory board that, because we've had the benefit of almost a year now of working at this, that there's probably an opportunity to bring the land use working group kind of up to speed on everything that we've had the benefit of learning over the last year. In all of the discovery that we've done, the conversations we've had, including with the state, to just be able to make sure that as they look at a bigger problem set than what we're focused on, that they understand the nuances of our subset of the problem. So I think that was, I would say that that's objective one of meeting one. Yeah. And I don't know what you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's, because of the time issue that you said, that in an ideal world, perhaps this land use working group would start first. Because that's the circumstance, I think there's value in just getting, it's gonna be a little messy, but I think getting everybody together and as Patrick said, sharing what we've done, why we've done it, and hear from them. I think that it just planning working experiences really, you have to have a certain amount of trust among people and understand and also understanding and how they think about planning. And so I think, it may seem like, be great, it would be better to postpone it, but I think there's value in doing it. In addition to it, I think what we've asked our group, the advisory board, to do is to begin to map out certain critical tasks that have to be scheduled and prioritized. And so we can come to that meeting with that. And I don't know where the land use is, but they can certainly do something similar on the issues that they're covering. And then you can start to integrate them and understand what might drive one, and there may be things that have to sort of take a back seat. So it's sort of a brain dump, if you will, of getting all those pieces on the table and trying to make some sense out of it. That would be my, and I'll say this, Mary, it comes a little bit, my response comes a little bit from like coming into a place like Emerson Hospital or Wellesley College or whatever, and it's never a clean moment to start. There's always these facilities needs and planning efforts. So you kind of just have to, all right, let's just put it all out here and figure out where we're at and try to make some sense out of it. So that's where I don't know if it's clean and gonna look great, but it will get us to, I think, a better understanding and perhaps a better outcome.
Yeah. I think the work
Could I ask? Sorry, go. Paul, did you want, go ahead, Paul.
Paul, then him.
I think the work that you've been doing is a model for planning, and there's a lot the land use group can learn is the model for planning. From the get-go with the land use planning, the question was how are we going to integrate these efforts. So I'm glad we're coming to the point where we're hitting it. I think it's important for the MCI advisory team to understand exactly what the land use group is working on right now. In phase one, and that is we're tasked with the municipal needs, DPW, fire and police, and consolidation of town activities. Of course, they're related to other uses of property, housing, later on, but that's what we're focused on right now. So anything we can do in this joint meeting to help us focus on that. That's our task right now in the first 12 months. I think that'd be useful. So in planning for that, I think, and I'm looking at Sven as well. Of course, your advisory team needs to understand exactly where we are and our initial needs to integrate thinking on this, which is not holistic every use possible, but it's municipal needs.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I'd call it mutual discovery, right? I think, like I said, we've had the benefit of probably a head start, but I'm sure you guys have done a lot of good work too. importantly, and this is an obvious point, but I think importantly, with the MCI question, there's an important other stakeholder, right, which is the state and what they want to see happen with the site, right? And so I think understanding, like, I think we have some understanding of their perspective as well. And I think being able to bring that to that small, I'll call it smaller group session, maybe, would be helpful.
Cameron?
Yeah, so thank you. Informative and helpful as always. And I was actually going to pick up a little bit on that point that you just were starting to talk about with in terms of the state, right? So not only what it is that they're interested in, but their timeline, right? And I know we don't know exactly, but are they? I mean, do we have a sense of? Because we're getting all coordinated here. I mean, at some point, they're another character in the story that might just show up and say, "Hey, good, it's all great. Here's our proposal." Do we have a sense of, are they kind of saying, "Hey, this is great. We're going to take our time and wait to see what sort of Concord comes back with," or are they getting, any sort of pressure to start? I know that they had designated some of these sites for future development. Are they getting pressure to move faster to take action?
I could answer that.
Well, do you want to do it? What I will say quickly is, the state is definitely eager for us to continue to make progress. And so, and as we are, we're definitely focused on that as well.
I think our interests are aligned there.
Yeah, there's an opportunity, of course. I mean, one of the things that we understand is most of the properties that the land use working group working on are town-owned properties. So obviously we're very familiar with them, and they tend to be single or dual use properties. The MCI property is a very complicated property. In our most recent meeting as an MCI board, we did an exercise that broke it down into about 5 or 6 sort of zones, each of which are a substantial parcel in and of themselves and could meet certain needs. I know the land use working group just recently got a tour of it, and I believe some of their members began to get an understanding of what some of the possibilities for this property are. That's by way of saying that this timeline is likely to result in the MCI property being developed on different schedules for different portions of the property. The portion closest to Route 2, for example, may end up being part of the Route 2 construction project and may not become available for actual reuse for quite some time or ever, as likely the parking lot that was used by employees may end up being part of Commonwealth Avenue. Whereas some of the portions of the property that are closest to the Junction Village site may have flexibility for some earlier stage. So we think there are very productive discussions that can be had around that could result in meeting municipal needs as well as developers' needs, as well as the state's objectives for housing and disposition of the property. I think Wendy, and then we'll hear from Swen.
Actually, yeah, let's have Spence speak because my topic is.
Sven, will you come up towards the table so the microphone face you up?
Welcome to the big boy.
I'm not sure if I get up again.
We'll help you.
So Sven Weaver, 50 Belknap, co-chair of the land use group. Just we're doing a lot of work right now, a lot of tours. We're catching up on a lot of information in a very short time period. We just toured the MCI property, and the idea for next Monday is just while we as the working group, land use working group, debrief on our impressions of the MCI property, is a good time to catch up and get an informational exchange with the MCI advisory board. It is not a meeting that goes 4 hours. It's focused on what did we see is being able to catch up with what the work you did to understand which timelines there are and give you a chance to ask us and get a sense of what timelines we are. I think Everything over and above that needs to be further kind of on a project plan, synchronized on the co-chairs levels to see how this can be done. We cannot next Monday sit down in that thing and try to solve a puzzle that, say, you already had a big puzzle in front of us. The land use working group has kind of that puzzle on steroids in front of us. So we have to just have the chance next Monday to catch up and start information flow between the two groups. I think that is the biggest what we can achieve.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think I have the distinction of
Okay.
being the first select board member addressed on bended knee.
Can I just follow up on two things? One is, I just want to recognize that your committee has done a lot of work, and the agency report that, and I read it front to cover.
Yeah.
It's a great report. You've done an awful lot of work, and I think it's great. But one question I have, has it been published? Is it on the website? Because I know I've been using a link, but I don't think I can share that. Has it been published?
Yes.
Is
and
there?
if it's okay for me to
Sure.
add
Yeah.
one piece in, so Dan mentioned in this update, that there were some shorter term items
Yeah.
that the advisory board was looking to do. And a few of them one of them was to make edits to the report. So we were on such an extreme timeline with the limitations on the funding that the advisory board really didn't have the luxury of building in a review period. So we got the final report, and now the board reviewed it and had some edits and suggestions and modifications that they were looking for. So that is one of the items of the short-term pieces that they're looking to do. A few of the others that were mentioned were to modify the website, to kind of really do a full release of the report and make sure the updated version is, present and available. And then, as I think Dan mentioned as well, to create an updated slide deck to use to brief stakeholders. And so those three items would come to about $4,000 from agency landscape and planning. We had a quote. And so at the last meeting, the advisory board talked about, they didn't have that quote in front of them yet, but that is within the realm of possibility. And I think although the funds from the $250,000 that was approved at town meeting is under the direction of the town manager. When Carrie and I spoke about this, it made sense as to be part of the update and transparency that this is a request, I believe from the advisory board to request these $4,000 to make the edits, to put it on the website, to do a full launch, and to get that other slideshow to take it to the next level here. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that and, had that understanding. And if you had questions about that, I'm happy to help.
When would that be available?
It would be just a couple weeks. We have, we wanted to have this conversation before we put in a change order, but, originally we were hoping to have it by the end of August, but we are midway through August, but it would be a few weeks.
Okay.
The pricing, they understand that we wanted it to be as soon as possible, so.
So just to be clear, there is a version that's.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't answer your question. I took it as an opportunity to say my talking points, but yes, there is a version online. It is without those edits that the advisory board thoughtfully, was hoping to make, but it is on the land use working group
Saw that.
page,
Yeah.
and they have a set of resources there. So it's available. It's open and available for people to download, but I think that the hope was to have some of these tweaks and edits before we did a full court press launch of the report.
Maybe for the public, can we put a link to that link? Because most people are gonna go to the MCI websites and they really don't know how to go to land use or what's going on. So we're talking about this a lot. I think there's a lot of public interest. I think it's important that the public know how to get to the report.
Yes.
That's all. So that was part of it.
So there was some
Yeah.
hope to try to
Yeah.
have the final version there, that had the cover letter from the board
I know. but it's-
associated with it, but it is available. I think also, well, go ahead.
No, part of it was sort of the recommendations in that report. I guess I had one observation because there is so much discussion around the wastewater treatment plant. It wasn't clear to me in the report how much of the land is the wastewater treatment report, and I think actually in the other report, I saw something different. So there's sort of the buildings themselves, but then the importance of those sand beds. I think we need to be crystal clear. What is the wastewater treatment plant? Because I saw different pictures and it looked like some of the
Good point.
open space was so that's just a.
That is a good
FYI.
point, and that's, I've started to refer to it as, we had 3 scenarios, which were version 1 scenarios, let's call them 1A, 1B, and 1C. And since then, we've learned quite a few new things, some details about what would be the desirable footprint of the wastewater treatment facility comes out of that report. Some other details are beginning to emerge about what seems to be the likely positioning of Route 2, and hopefully within the next 90 days or so, we're going to get a better idea of what Department of Transportation is thinking about with respect to Commonwealth Avenue. And so some of those baseline assumptions had to be assumptions in the agency work, and they turn out to not be quite accurate. So this scenario that the advisory board is working to put together is really necessary because it's going to work on updated, better assumptions. There'll still be assumptions to some extent, but there'll be better assumptions based on what we've really learned in all these parallel activities that have been going on, and calling that scenario 2.0. And so what the advisory board has also been discussing in terms of budget and expenditures is, once that scenario is now there, that will represent work by the board trying to identify what represents the best set of trade-offs for Concord and
Yes.
the development. And so that's going to need its own publication and rollout and so forth. So we're talking about what resources might best support that. And we've talked about it as like a phase 4A or something like that. Again, it might represent a change on the agency contract. So there's several pieces that are in progress. And this is just a quarterly update from the advisory board on where their work is. And we're expecting more to come.
It's the first time we've heard, this is a major milestone that you don't, so I just want to celebrate it a bit.
Yeah.
But also the other part of that is, I know you've had some discussions around phasing, to your point about Rotary, there's a timeline
Yeah,
there, there's a wastewater treatment. So I know that there was some discussions about that might be something that agency would help with, and I would like to hear more about that.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Can I just comment? Your question and your response actually kind of captures the challenge that we have. And so, and I don't know that I did a good job articulating it, but the whole motivation behind putting a stake in the ground
Yeah.
is to say, with the information that we currently have,
Yeah.
recognizing that it's going to get more and more informed with the various people that are contributing to it and everyone's group. We're just going to start with that because it's going to help advance it. And planning is a tricky and sometimes messy process, but it's the best thing we have.
And to the earlier comment, Mary, about, are we in some ways, are we too far ahead of kind of the land use subcommittee? There is still so much to go through.
Yeah.
And I think, probably many kind of unforeseen curves in the road that, I think we should proceed at, as fast as possible, kind of the current speed that we're moving. And then if at some point we determine that we're at a decision point that requires, the land use subcommittee to kind of catch up or make a decision that will then unlock what can be or can't be done at MCI, then we'll get there, but we don't foresee that in the next quarter or two, I don't think.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you for shifting your
We're miraculously right on time.
I know. Plan. It was planned.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever been this deep into a meeting and been close to it. So,
You did good.
okay. So, we're going to discuss next. With thanks and staff for that discussion, our potential actions around response to anti-Semitic and hate incidents. This is a continuation of the discussion that we've had over the last meeting or so where, we have in front of us in our packet, the statement from the DEI Commission about, in response, as well as a draft of a statement for standing against anti-Semitism, which will be discussed in more detail at the DEI Commission meeting, which is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. And I think where we left it last time was that each of us was gonna sort of give some consideration to which of the recommended actions in the action plan, in the proposed action plan, or other actions we felt we would be prepared to endorse as a select board at this time, recognizing that this is really a first step on this journey. By no means the last word on what we will do, just more what we will do next. So with that, what I thought we'd do is take an opportunity to just go around the table and have each of you share what you might be thinking, how that may have evolved over the last couple of weeks, and we'll see where that brings us. Does anybody want to start?
I like to say what I did. Certainly the community engagement is sort of the focus that I've been concerned about on behalf of the select board. So you asked us last time to go out, look and talk to different groups in the community, and I did that. So I met actually with the chairs of the Concord Carlisle Human Rights Council, and they are more than willing to support whatever efforts we come up with, and are happy to do that. And as you know, they sort of work a little more behind the scenes than taking the leadership role. So we certainly have their support. I also outreach to the League of Women Voters, and I actually met with Diane Proctor and a couple other members of the league, and it actually turned into a planning session. We started thinking about coordinating a public session in early September for the public. It would be an evening meeting, really talking, let's scope a focus on what's a hate crime, what is anti-Semitism, and what do you do when you see it? It'd be sort of a panelist type discussion. But it's not a commitment. But what I think it's a great idea. The panelist idea would obviously, we want representatives of the DEI Commission to be there. Obviously members of the school committee, some Jewish family representation, about faith leaders, and even maybe a social worker. So really put together sort of some good thinking about how that session could go. It's not definitive. The action next step is that the league's going to discuss this at the board meeting this Wednesday. So more to follow on that, but I also encourage both the league and also the members of the Human Rights Council to attend the DEI meeting tomorrow, so that we sort of coordinate the effort. So that's sort of what I think is the next step.
I'll go quickly.
Mary?
Yeah, I brought it up at the Concord Cultural Council, and we had a good discussion. We talked about the history, but we didn't come up with any actions. On my own, though, as I said at, I think, our last meeting, I really am now supportive of a reporting system, and I'd like to learn more about that. I think it should be under the purview of the select board. That's my thinking. And I'm wondering if we have some outstanding questions about it, and I'm wondering if we need a very, very fast-moving task group to get answers to those questions, you know, in a month or something. We need to move quickly before we would actually go live on something like
It
this.
strikes me that
That's
the DA's group has a lot of information and has a lot of knowledge, and maybe just
Yep.
one or two people just meeting
It
with
might-
them and understanding
Yep.
like what you can run into, because I'm a little concerned about creating it. I think we might need to, but there's a lot that we might uncover first before we sort of put it together.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fair.
I agree. I mean, I think there's a principle here that we need to make sure we have ways of understanding what incidents are happening, of making sure that we're, having the reporting be timely and making sure that people are aware and that there are public updates. I think part of that, exactly, Wendy, what you just said, which is what exists today that can be leveraged, Does it mean that we have to create something new? I just don't know. I don't know enough to say, hey, well, here's what's out there. Are there gaps? I think we need to follow the principles of what we want to solve for there. And I think related to the reporting and accountability mechanisms is one of the bullets on policy as well, which is, what are our existing policies, and are there any reforms that need to happen there? So, in addition to supporting kind of the community dialogue and us being out there and having a lot of conversations, I do think really sort of digging into, what is the reporting that exists today? How can that be leveraged? Is there a gap that can't be closed with what we have that exists? And what are our policies? And do we need to, modify or update any of our policies? Because I think that, it also speaks to taking action beyond just kind of listening and having dialogue.
Okay.
Formulating.
Okay. Go ahead, Saul.
Yeah, I certainly agree that on the reporting part of this, there's a lot of legwork. We have to figure out what exists out there. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We also have to identify what reporting really means. Who reports what? What are the
Right.
types of incidents? What is the bar for reporting? And so, but putting that aside, I want to reflect on some community dialogue I've had. I think as a community, we're just beginning to confront the issue of anti-Semitism. We've had a lot of conversations for a few months, and there's a lot of organizing around that. And anti-Semitism, not just in the schools, but what, if any, occurs in the town. We were shocked into out of complacency by the ADL complaint, but that's clear. So that was a catalyzing event. I see in the community a lot of uncertainty. I see a lot of concern. I still see a lot of anger. I see a lot of disappointment out there, disappointment in our institutions. I see a call for action. I see a call for action both on the part of the school administration, school committee, and the select board. I see the schools just beginning to confront and address the issues and the policies they need. That's certainly their issue. We can help on that, but they are. I think Dr. Hunter has communicated to the school community that they're looking at those policies. I see the community and the community organizations, some of whom represented in this room, really beginning to organize and planning in a really very meaningful and substantive way. To start planning for meaningful dialogue and to take actions. And importantly for us, I see the need for the select board as elected leaders to engage, to really, I mentioned this before, to shine a bright light on this issue in the community. Our role is to energize and to catalyze other people into action. I think, the motion before us talks about community dialogue and reporting system. Those two items kind of go together, because without information and data to talk about and inform the community dialogue, I think we fall short. I think one of our major roles is to raise awareness in the town. I see a lot of this raising awareness of anti-Semitism in the town, what that means, and really to make meaningful progress in moving towards eliminating that. I think others in the public have said we should have a goal of eliminating anti-Semitism in the town. I think we can go a long way towards that by raising awareness, having a reporting system, and having community dialogue. And I think those pieces kind of go together. And a lot of details that we worked out on all of those. And the reporting part and the community dialogue, we have to rely on other committees, the DI Commission, the community organizations to do that. You mentioned on the reporting systems, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I just think we need to start and take action. And even though there's some uncertainty in the pieces, let's resolve that uncertainty, in fairly short order, especially on the reporting end of things.
Okay.
Gosh, I'm still thinking through what I wanted to say, but just following up on, are there policies and procedures that we need to evaluate? I do want to mention that we don't receive a lot of information about what's happening in the community on this particular topic. Not because I don't think it's not happening, but I think, we're different than the schools, right? There are different parameters. The tools that we have to address it really are through the police department. And so anything that comes in for us really is moved over to the police department very quickly and evaluated by the police department on whether or not it's meeting the criteria for investigation. I did ask the chief, and I know the chief's not here, and I don't believe that Captain Goldman is here either. So I did, oh, he is. Yeah, I mean, why don't you do that? But I just wanted to take a moment. So we did ask the police department to review records from the last 5 years and how many incidences were reported and did they investigate? And there were 11 in the last 5 years. So that's not a lot. And again, that doesn't mean that there were only 11, but there were only 11 that were reported. And each of these incidences, there is a standard protocol that the department goes through. So they are notifying the Attorney General's office, the Anti-Defamation League, the Middlesex DA's office, the state police, and then the Human Rights Council. And so for incidences that are reported that aren't meeting the threshold for the department, the police department to look at further. And I will say, I think the police department does a great job with everything that comes into them. But there are things that are moved over to the Human Rights Council. But again, we're not receiving a lot of these reports. And I think there's a variety of reason for that. So I do think having a system where people feel more able to report things that are issues. But maybe I think a lot of times people don't want to bother the police department. But I think, it's important to be able to understand because 11 incidences in 5 years is it's not indicative of what we've been hearing over the last several weeks and months.
I think when I talked earlier about lowering the bar, I'm not talking about just incidents that are reportable to the police. I'm talking about, and this is sort of, with the bystander training that's being done right now, when does some sort of senses an anti-Semitic event or a name calling or something that doesn't fall into a criminal area. And I think it's important for the community to understand that even those are occurring. And so we have some work to do in defining what a reportable incident is. But I think that anti-Semitism takes many different forms. And I think we have to define those and then come up with a reporting system which captures, maybe the most serious events are reportable, but there are probably 3 or 4 other categories of events that happen to individuals that should be reported that don't necessarily have to breach confidentiality. So we have to figure out how to get that information into a system and out to the community.
I agree that one of the first steps is to understand what the process is today and how and how it's being executed. I know that about 2 years back when the DEI Commission was first proposing that we do an incident reporting, some early work was done on that, and I think it's important to pick that up. And I'm hoping that our action here this evening will serve as encouragement to do that, and that we can first come to understand what we can know about what exists today in the police, as well as the resources that DA Ryan referred to when she joined the meeting with the school committee, and try to understand the effectiveness of those things, as well as what has happened in incident reporting situations in the past, so that we can build on that, even as we try to move forward with those people who may have been away all summer and not noticed that we're, recognizing there's a situation here that it does need to be addressed. So I'm still thinking that the things that we should do is, endorse and empower some of what the DEI commission has proposed. I'm not quite there yet on rushing to add additional task forces and committees. I'm not saying that there isn't a time and place for that, because we often do find a time and a place for that in Concord. But I think that being a little bit more curious about how to engage which groups have capabilities that we may not have completely evaluated yet is an important step. And then we can certainly come back to whether we need to create additional specific missions to achieve. I'm very supportive of the idea of let's evaluate what's there for an incident and pick one and start to use it. I just don't know which one,
Who would do
which
that?
answer
Mark?
that is.
Who would do that?
I'd like to ask the DEI commission to pick up their work, and I'd like to, from the perspective of understanding what the DA's office does, I think that that can be done with the chief's help, and I know the town manager's got a suggestion.
Oh, well, no, I just wanted to note that Captain Goldman actually would like the opportunity to maybe talk about
Great.
why or why not the police department is receiving or not receiving complaints.
Right.
So are we,
Co-host, so he should be able to unmute
Okay.
himself.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can, Brian. Thank you.
So a lot of factors go into this, and I in particular have worked with the DEI Commission a couple of years ago. There's a lot of angst when it comes to reporting anything, whether it's anti-Semitism, racism, you name it. Some people feel like they don't want to bother us, so they don't report it. Some people don't want to have their name attached to it for fear of repercussions. And then others just chalk it up and try and move forward, which I think is the wrong messages that get put out into the community. We take anything that's given to us, and we have, as Kerry read off the list, we have a variety of notifications and protocols that we go through to notify. Just because it isn't a criminal act doesn't mean we don't make those notifications. And I also think that's important to note, because it's getting that information out and then maybe getting some guidance, whether it's the Attorney General's office or the ADL, on how maybe we can best serve those in the community affected by this.
Mark, can I, I want to talk a little bit more about whether we need a task force or not. What I'm thinking is the advantage of a task force is that it would be under the select board. It could be fast moving, and I think my personal opinion is I think there are advantages to showing momentum, showing a very high level of leadership within the community. And and I know that there are many people that have volunteered to be on a task force. So I understand that we don't want task force, the reluctance to add another committee and a task force, but I guess I want this to have momentum. I want it to have leadership. I'm right now I'm kind of favoring a task force. I'd like to hear what other people think.
But can I also just say that the DEI commission is our commission that does some of this work, and we haven't even given them a chance to meet and talk about what they haven't met since June.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
We had these discussions, so, I mean, I personally would like to have the DEI team take the lead, and maybe some people need to participate in addition, not just the commission, but I think the commission's looking at outreaching to the community and engaging other organizations in the process. So I'd like to see them take some action and see what they come up with.
I'd like to see the DI Commission take the lead on part of this. I think it's appropriate to consider the motion.
Yeah.
Because really, it's a little bit chicken and egg. I
Yeah.
think the select board really has to declare its intent to move forward. Then we can figure out, is there a task force,
Do it.
Yeah.
exactly who does it,
Yeah.
And, but I personally like for us to vote on something and whether
And-
we aye or nay.
I'm okay with that. I guess what I'm asking is, if we could have an update from the DEI commission to see what momentum and ideas they have, and to make sure that the community knows that that the select board is behind it, that it
Yeah.
is something
I
that.
think I want to signal that level of support for what the DEI commission is working on in advance, and then give them a chance to work it too, and then come back in with additional support. I feel like Cameron wants to say something.
Okay.
No, I just was going to add in the schools too, right? So I mean, I think it's the DEI commission. I think the schools have, I think, taken this seriously and are putting together probably even more extensive plans too. So I just it's not to say we don't want to take action, but I'm just not ready to say, hey, we should have an additional task force or something. I think the DEI, we want to be supportive of that. I think we want to be supportive of the schools and the plans that they're taking. And then again, if there's gaps, we want to figure out how to fill them.
What is the select board going to do? We're talking about other people, that we need to
Right.
declare
I
that
think-
we're taking leadership
Right.
Yeah,
and others are helping us to do that. Let's talk about that. And then we
Okay.
can talk about
Okay.
so
how the pieces fall together.
yeah,
Okay.
and so to my mind, creating a task force or a committee is actually delegating some of that. And I'm not really prepared to delegate that at this point. I'm actually trying to hold it a little bit closer at this stage of the game. I do think that we should be creating some clear direction to investigate and establish an incident reporting process. I think that's very concrete. I think it's something we can look at existing systems and decide if they're not sufficient to our purpose. And that purpose will be defined by the work that the DEI commission is going to do along with us for the in the very near future. We will initiate that project clearly. And in the meantime, what I would like to see us do is some kind of coalition building, because I think if we're going to have a task force or committee, I would like to see that represented very broadly along the lines of what Wendy was talking about with the League of Women Voters, with the Human Rights Council, with the faith leadership community. And I think we should be absolutely there saying this needs to happen, and it's time to get on board. But I want to give all those groups an opportunity to give us the benefit of their thinking on what that should look like. And because I don't feel prepared to say, okay, now we'll get a charge and start picking people for that. I'm just not ready.
I absolutely agree with you. We have to get as much involvement of the community as we possibly can. But what are we declaring
What do we?
our intent?
Yeah.
So you have a motion.
We do have a motion
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read the motion?
Yes, please read the motion.
Great, okay. So, it's a motion for discussion for tonight. In our role as elected town leaders, the select board sees the need for deliberate action to combat anti-Semitism across the town. To that end, we endorse moving forward on two parallel tracks. The first track involves community engagement, including community dialogue, education, and input. We will look to the DEI Commission working with community organizations to lead this effort. The second track involves reporting and communication protocol development for reporting anti-Semitic and other hate incidences, collecting data, storing the data, and communicating the data transparently to the public. The select board will work with town management, the police, the district attorney's office, and the school committee to develop the second track. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Um,
Any discussion is a motion.
Yeah, I guess what I heard was the people who were doing it were the people at the end. Can you read that again? Select board, town manager, police.
Right, the select board will work with the town management, the police, the district attorney's office, and the school committee to develop this second track. That's the reporting.
That's the reporting. So,
You can include and others as appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Find that down.
Okay.
Jim, any thoughts?
So first of all, I like it. So thank you for putting that together. I think it is something that demonstrates, how I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I think for at least for myself, how we want to, tackle some of these issues. The only verbiage on the site, it said develop. I think we might want to say like evaluate and develop, or I also want to cover sort of encapsulate like looking at what already exists and how we might use or leverage that.
What about implement?
Yeah.
So the second track involves reporting and communication protocol. Maybe it's reporting, evaluation, reporting, and communication protocol
The
development.
intent is to
Yeah.
Yeah, or just because it said develop at the end. I just don't know if it's evaluate what exists and further develop or something. That's all. I was just trying to capture that piece, but otherwise I wouldn't change anything.
Right, good, ready?
Do you want to make some comments?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, does it public comment?
okay.
We'll take a couple comments.
My name's Craig Onelmer. I'm at 27 Lang Street, and I wanted to elaborate on the letter I sent to you this afternoon, Mr. Orwell, for dissemination through them. There is on the books, if you want to call it, on the website, town website, a memo of understanding between Concord Public and Concord Carlisle Regional Schools and Concord Police Department. It exists. And it goes, and this MOU goes through very clearly what exactly needs to be reported to the police. Mandatory, immediate, no questions asked. If it happens, you do it. Among these things are possessions of firearms, drug dealing, etc. Also, and again, this doesn't make any distinction between the seriousness of this. Any incident involving an actual or suspected hate crime or violation of civil rights, including but not limited to an assault or battery upon a person or damage to the real or personal property of a person with intent to intimidate such person because of the person's race, color, national origin, sexual orientation, or disability in violation of etc. If the Concord Bridge can be believed, and I think we can, that MOU has been violated on multiple occasions already by existing folks there at the public school. It's already happened. And I want to know, it's a public safety issue. It's well known these days, I think, that synagogues are attacked, lit on fire. The synagogue I attend regularly has police presence. This is not simply a DEI issue. To me, this goes beyond that or augments that to a public safety issue, and it involves the police directly. And I wonder what it would be like if in our town we had heard that there was somebody at the school carrying a weapon and that the school administration knew about it, but they didn't call the cops. Or if there was someone dealing drugs on school property and they didn't call the cops. I think the community outrage would be incredible. And as a citizen, as I read this MOU, I see no difference between that kind of reported incident requirement and a possible hate crime reporting possible incident. Because it's not up to the school to define what is a hate crime. The police do that. If you think it might be, you call. So I would encourage whatever aspect that you go forward with, task force, whatever, please, 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 there must be an emphasis on safety, public safety for everybody. That needs to be a charge, and I think that probably goes beyond the charge of the DEI committee. I think that is in your realm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark, I wanted, what if any comments on the motion, because the motion before, are you inviting general comment?
General comments,
General
in
comments,
case we decide
in
that,
case we miss something.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, good.
at least we're getting educated. Mr. Williams. Good evening.
Good evening, Michael Williams, 1284 Sudbury Road. I'm a member of the school committee, and I'm speaking for myself. Paul, I'd have to say to you, not all of us were surprised. We were horrified, but not all of us were surprised that things like this are going on. I would say that in this moment, recurring events structure a reality. Let's look back in time, a near race riot in our high school in 1978. Come forward to the letter of discontent in 2002 of our Medco families penned to our school administration. The 2023 widely publicized assault of a child of color in our middle school. Homophobic, racist, and anti-Semitic graffiti in and around our high school, along with the disbanding of our Medco PTG in the fall of 2024. Now, we have complaint filed with the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights alleging rampant anti-Semitism. We were not surprised. We may say that this is not who we are, but recurring events structure a reality. And in that reality, it will remain constant until we as a community come together to initiate the actions necessary to alter it. In the current socio-political climate, when viewed through the lens of inclusivity and belonging, Concord is not unique. We compare ourselves to other nations, other towns in our nations that have been unable to stem the increasing tide of gender-based hate, racial hate, religious hate, and anti-Semitism. However, by the leadership you're demonstrating here at the Select Board and with the protocols advanced and supported by the DEI Commission, perhaps we can become unique by creating and enacting the change needed to support a multicultural community where all feel welcome, all feel safe, and all can find their niche to call home. By race, religion, gender identity, ability, if any child in this community can be made to feel unsafe, then none of us and none of our children are safe. Without that sense of safety, education is impossible. In this moment, I don't believe that we need to move quickly to address this problem. We need to move purposefully. And we need to not only understand what our information reporting structures have brought, we need to understand how they've failed so we can look with precision and work with, in my case, my superintendent and my colleagues on the school committee to make the changes necessary and bring the professionals in this area on board to advise us on how we can move forward so that we identify our transgressions, support those aggrieved, rehabilitate through education and accountability, and build a system that uplifts all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hi.
Hi, I'm Deborah Dorfman, 27 Lennox Street. And I know that the last time I met with you, I talked about data, but I have to talk about it again because you're talking about an incident reporting system, which is really important. But I think I want to emphasize the importance of the accuracy of data. And I think it's important that it's transparent and reported so that people, understand and that there's a purpose for that data being reported. And so there's an action item at the end of that. But I am concerned because I did read the superintendent's statement that she put out recently. And unfortunately, even in her own statement, she says she reports data, but then says, well, this is probably not accurate. And that's probably because they don't have a good sense of the reporting of it. And so I think, again, I have to emphasize that part of like a reporting system is to make sure that the data is accurate and that we're getting that. And that requires to have assurances that people who are mandated reporters actually report, and that others feel who aren't mandated reporters, but others feel that they can. But I think part of this, going back to the mandated reporters, is to ensure that there's some accountability there. I don't work for the town of Concord, so I don't know, but I do think this is important to make sure that people understand if they are mandated reporters, that they are and what that means and the scope and the breadth of that. And when they're supposed to do that and how quickly they're supposed to do that. And that there should be no fear or of any sort of retaliation. If there is, I don't know if there is, but I think that's part of what we need to get to the bottom of is, you know, for people who are mandated reporters, like at school, the teachers are all mandated reporters. Is there any fear of reporting? Is there, you know, even if it's just the imaginary or maybe it's founded, but I think we have to find out. And I'm sorry, this is sort of disjointed, but I just really feel these are really important pieces because without the accurate data, it's going to be really hard to address these issues. So thank you for listening today and your time.
Since you've been talking about us a lot tonight, we should just say we're here. And I'm Joe Colombo, 90 Black Horse Place. I'm a member of the DI Commission, not a co-chair, but I used to be.
I'm Rose Rotzley, co-chair of the DEI Commission here.
And we just wanted to make a little pinpoint in historical memory, because I know some of you may or may not know. The DI Commission was formed, I believe, 2021, and in 2022, one of the first things after a lot of work was it is townwide survey, and in that townwide survey, we had about 500 responses, and of those 500 responses, I believe, I don't have it in front of me tonight, but like 72% of the people had experienced or witnessed some kind of aggression, some kind of discriminatory aggression. I don't know exactly, but so we had data, and that data led to a town meeting in 2022, I believe, where we brought forth the article about having a DEI director to help build out this kind of system. And weren't able to, even though the town passed it, we weren't able to fund it. So that never got into place, but we've been talking about a reporting system for like several years. And I know you may have mentioned best practices. There's a lot of evidence we collected from the town of Acton, from the town of Belmont, who has their own version of the reporting system. So just as you go and pursue this, and you end up having in your, make sure that someone or someone's from the DI Commission's experience is on the group that ends up working on the reporting system, because you know there's some stuff out there already. And yeah, it seems like it's a thing we need to do. And sure, people aren't going to report, especially when they don't know there's a place to report to. So if it's not easy, if it's not obvious, I just go home. So I went home about what happened to me. That's what I had to add. I think historically.
No, I think the historical context is important. I think we mentioned this last time we were here too about, you know, we did initiate a plan to hire a DI director so we could actually anchor this kind of incident reporting system and to be able to implement it. And I think it's really important that this data be owned and anchored and there would be ongoing transparency and reporting. So I think any way we can allocate both the resources, prioritization, because if we know that we're going to prioritize this, and I agree, we should act with urgency. And this, I do agree that this is a public safety issue. And we need to work in collaboration with several other entities in town and to act rapidly and swiftly because it is a public safety matter.
And if you're interested, we'll be talking about this more tomorrow afternoon.
Yes, yes. And you're all welcome to come to our commission. 5 p.m. at RB Wheeler.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.
See you too.
And anyone online? Okay, so we had a motion. Any further
We ready?
discussion? Yeah.
Roll call?
Yep.
Okay. Starting with Mr. McKenna. We're
Aye.
voting on the motion.
Yep, yeah, we talked through if there's any edits there as discussed. Aye.
Aye. Mr. Bong?
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli, aye. Mr. Howell?
Aye,
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
thanks. And this conversation will conclude tomorrow evening.
Is it RB Wheeler?
That was Harvey Wheeler.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. On to transportation. So the next item on our agenda is a discussion about the goals and findings of the joint meeting with the Transportation Advisory Group, Public Works Commission, Traffic Management Group on transportation planning. So this is a little bit of a continuation of the dialogue we had or the presentation that we had from Lisa Sandoval last meeting. That familiarized us a little bit with the origins of this, and we're back here with our partner Alan. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be here.
Having us.
Let me take the lead.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right, so we are sort of looking to close the loop on some interests and concerns that we've all heard relating to transportation, safety, traffic, roads. They're all interrelated. And over the past year or so, there's been a lot of energy and interest in better understanding what is Concord doing for both improvements to our roads and sidewalks, which is in essence a safety, issue for all users. And interrelated has been ongoing, concerns about safety and investments or lack thereof in things that aren't just pavement. And so we've heard a lot from the general public. We recognize that there's interest for improvements, and we've been talking about the challenge of not having funding to advance some of these interests, primarily when you're talking about pedestrian amenities, cycling amenities, crosswalks, intersections that need to be improved. And Public Works is focused on sort of the hard engineering pavement side of things. Well, funding has never really happened for some of those other, sort of interests. We've been working with planning land management over the past year or two to try and look at integrating these other interests into our projects. And I think what's happened is a lot of people will hear from individuals through, it might be the police department or highway grounds or engineering or even planning, about areas of concern. And the challenge has been, well, it may be received and discussed internally. People are sort of at a loss for, well, what's happened to it? And oftentimes there may be simple remedies that might be just operational, and you might have crews go out and do some clearing along a right of way, so you have better sight lines, or there might be the occasional correcting of some signage or something like that. But when it's more involved, there's generally just a lack of resources. So there isn't anything other than, thank you, we received your concern. We hired a consultant over a year ago to help compile the information that we did have. They put some surveys. We had a charrette where we sort of invited the community to Harvey Wheeler to help identify areas of interest and concerns. That information was compiled. It was shared to some degree, but there's been sort of a lack of a next step. And I think the gap is, well, you got our interest. We want to see some improvements, and we want to understand how is the town going to deal with it. And then we had this issue of the funding on our roads and sidewalks to incorporate an allowance for integrating safety. So we're now at a point where there's a nexus if we get the funding. And that's a big, that's the question. Without the funding, we don't have many resources to deal with all this built up interest and concern. With the funding, it is clear that we do have some legitimate money available. And I think what we're trying to do is look at the best way to look at our existing systems, including staff, as well as advisory boards or volunteer committees like the Transportation Advisory Committee, Public Works Commission, and even Select Board to some degree, to try and figure out what's the best way to advance and acknowledge these inquiries, put them on a list, make sure people can agree and understand that, if they have a concern, it's been captured. There's going to be a need to prioritize these things. I want to be very clear. Well, it looks like a lot of money. it's nowhere near all the needs that we've heard. So we're gonna have to be very transparent as far as, well, where are we gonna spend those resources? And vet that and make sure that it isn't just a staff decision because, something is basically more public. And so we've been working internally to try and look at our existing systems, and that includes not just the Transportation Advisory Committee, but the Traffic Management Group. And people hear TMG, and there's always this question, well, what are they? These are just staff that get together to talk. Well, yes, because these are people who can do implementation, but when it's beyond that, they really haven't had a lot of resources to, sort of take on these initiatives or even advance them to sort of a broader community interest to say, yes, we do want to proceed with that. We want to fund it. We understand there's going to be design costs. Let me just kind of remind people, a few of our transportation safety initiatives that I can point to are the project we recently completed on Main Street in Walden. That wasn't just about traffic and cars, that was about pedestrians and safety. That project was, I think, $240,000 or something like that. Not inexpensive. Sudbury Road, 7-star, where we did some improvements that were identified as a high interest and need. That project was somewhere around $150,000, and it takes time, could be months if not years, to go through the appropriate assessment, design, procurement, bid, and construction. So these things take time. What we're looking to do is, should we get the funding through this roads and safety borrowing request at the ballot, there will be millions of dollars to spend that is going to be dedicated towards enhancements to just the pavement and sidewalk. And that's real money, but I will also caution, it won't solve every ask, everybody's pet interest. And that's why we need to make sure that those are vetted more publicly and balanced with sort of a prioritization. And so people can at least recognize, well, I know my ask was heard. I see where it is on the list. And I also see these other projects that I hadn't thought about. But, at some point, at least they can understand, maybe why their project was being prioritized or not, and have a voice in, helping kind of champion it if they would like to. So we've been working internally to design a framework that we believe staff can administer. We're working with representatives of TAC as we're trying to sort of fashion what's the right dance, what's the, how do we receive information, how do we engage it and deal with it if it's a project that we can do without elevating it. Maybe it's something we identify and perform. And if it's something we need to elevate, then we can bring it to another entity. It could be TAC to help us, sort of understand and look at the need and maybe become an advocate to say, this should be a priority. It gets on a list. Maybe it dovetails with a construction project. We've talked about the efficiencies of if we're doing construction in an area and there's a project that may independently have been $150,000. Well, if we're doing the work in that zone, this is the time, and that would change the prioritization. Why are we going to do that one now? Because we're going through that corridor. We're going to take care of that intersection. So it'll evolve year to year. But I think the real challenge is just making sure people understand if they've got or identified a need or interest, they can see that, yes, it was received. They know what the review looks like. And that's one of the things we're looking at, how to report up so that we can help a volunteer committee understand, what is the, what's the complexity, what are the potential costs, what are some of the considerations, so that staff can do that, because we can, as far as making the ultimate decision, as far as where does this fit on the townwide kind of scale of need or interest. That's something which, I think can be more publicly vetted. I think that's sort of the overview of what we're after.
You imagine you've got criteria. So you have a project, it needs to be assessed. And so there's safety concerns, there's time and that there's location that will come into it. So,
Density and
so could that
volume.
criteria something that you have today, or are you still forming and storming on what this process is?
No, so it's interesting, the criteria people remember, and this was regretted before the existing staff at Public Works was involved. The complete street was an initiative. That's right, and that was where it was a similar kind of interest of identifying areas of town that had been flagged through traffic studies or police reports or that sort of thing, hot zones. And then there was some public outreach, is this information good? It was kind of like the study only before it became really well known. We identified a list of about 54 sites. It's interesting because there are sites on it, or there are sites that we've heard since that seem to have been a priority that didn't make the list. So I don't know how that happened. But once you have a list, we worked with a consultant to kind of rank order and prioritize this. We don't have the secret sauce or formula to do that. We're looking to sort of revisit that with the new staff. And that may be one of the things that we can do as far as, a screening that we can maybe make as a recommendation. We're trying to figure out what's the entity that's going to bless that complete street, because that is a document that needs to be submitted to the state to make you eligible for funding. That's its interest. So if you're on the list and they have complete street money available and you can point to it, that's how it would work. If we have another site that's a priority that isn't on the complete street list, but it may be a smaller project and it's related to a construction zone, we don't need state funding to support it. We would dip into the resources that we're looking for the borrowing. So that's sort of the balance. But yes, staff will be working with consultants to try and help identify what is that screening, what level of screening can we do? Then we can advance it to, if it's TAC, at least so they can vet it, discuss it, understand it. And at least everybody, we're still looking at the mechanics of what's the best way that people can then sort of participate. That's what we're working on right now. And in fact, that's why we're talking about a joint meeting in the future where we can sort of unveil some of this, what is it that we're proposing? And again, it's just a proposal, and sort of have a public, sort of vetting to say, are we close? Does it seem to make sense? But we're using resources that we have. It's very interesting, and it's kind of, I'm sorry to say, the DEI model. The transportation, initially, it was identified as a real priority, and what we're talking about in the 2030 Envision Concord, very high level, we need to address this. It was identified as such a priority. There was a position that was created to be, the question of transportation manager or, planner or that. And we stood it up with the idea that we had the staff, and unfortunately it was sort of short-lived. And it's just one of these things. We're going to look at $27.5 to $30 million of spending over the next 5 years, very aggressively. And we do know that needs to be managed. And so we want to make sure that, as we develop the program, that we also make sure we have the right resources. So it's all dependent on, if we have funding, we can do things that we really couldn't even talk about before. And if we don't, I think it's going to be a real challenge, because we still have the desire and need and interest. It's a question of, how do we even realize the base needs, So that's sort of the overview. Lisa and her team is kind of coming on board. She's been coordinating with TAC. I've been working with the Public Works Commission. Paul has been in discussion on behalf of the select board to be sort of, internally, we want to work on what structure might make sense so we can then present something kind of as a joint meeting.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why we might want to sponsor a joint meeting of this is because now that this more broad, assuming that the vote passes next Tuesday, so that's what unlocks the opportunity to come up with a actual programmatic response that has a multi-year planning horizon, and actually over the long term addresses more needs for less money, then this team has been beginning the design process of what that actually looks like. And so I think that the item for discussion tonight is what's the appropriate timing and what might the goals of that initial kickoff be. I think it would be to sort of begin to create a higher level of awareness that this is the turn it's making. When frankly, the discretionary, there was no discretionary money for streets, but numbered in the single digit hundreds of thousands per year, there wasn't much point in having that because it was always, what's the Band-Aid you can apply to the problem that just happened? And this puts us on a very different footing. And so we need to plan for it and recognizing that the structures that we have on the committee side, from the citizen participation, may need to evolve. And so that's what we've been hearing from the Public Works Commission, from the Transportation Advisory Committee, that we may need to take an action along those lines once this design sort of evolves. So that's what we're teaming up with.
So let's hope that this does pass. And I'm glad to hear that you're working together. What I remember, what I came away from the last time we spoke was a need for transparency from the residents' point of view. So I was thinking it from the residents' point of view, more transparency and what's the process. So when I hear you talk about there'll be a list and there'll be responses, so people know when they'll get a response and how, and the process for prioritizing. I think that those are all really important things to think of when you're looking at it from the residents' point of view. So I really encourage you to think of it from that point of view, because what we're hearing a lot is, we don't get a response, or we don't know where this went, or, so if we have the money, I think it's great that you're working together, but it's the transparency, the responsiveness that I think we should focus on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we're working on in terms of the new process and making sure there's more transparency in terms of like the resident requests and inquiries.
Yes, exactly.
And then how they're addressed and if they can't be addressed in a routine way, if they're higher costs, how are they elevated? And and kind of picking that up and how that's reviewed, whether that's maybe initial staff review and then an ability for there to be public input through TAC. I think that's that's kind of the things that we're thinking about and kind of restructuring the process.
Right.
It's one thing that, when the article was put together and the funding we're reporting on, I think the general sense was we're talking about road paving because there's road conditions. But what I'm hearing, what actually is happening, you're thinking about roads in a more holistic way, safety, crosswalk, sidewalk, maybe bike lanes. And that's an important communication piece that I think has escaped a lot of people. I think it's important because we're looking at roadways, not just from the paving, but from overall safety and usability.
Right.
And that's really important.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think Mark alluded to it. I would highly recommend the podcast allows people to listen.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it is for those people, it is intended to be helpful so they can understand it because it's complex. And usually the challenge we have is we're going in with engineering models and things to make case on road conditions and PCIs, but effective, it's just good conditions of the right of way will benefit a lot of people. And part of the good condition is what improvements can you do that are not just pavement condition, but alignments and, safety, signage and that sort of thing.
So have you guys given some thought to the proposed timing for when we should do this off?
We're talking about the fall.
Yeah, it would be, probably September, October. We're working the system through right now. And we're not far off. I can share some things. We've been talking about what staff should be represented, on some of these things, and we're reconsidering that. But I'd say it'd be a September timetable. Because really, once we know the funding is there, we can sort of drill into the details.
Anything else we need to know about this? Get out and vote on the 19th?
Yeah, really,
Well, that's, I'm not on bended knee here. They tried that.
You wouldn't be.
Right.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
And I just add one more, sure, comment, so can you hear me?
Yeah, you can see.
I don't have to bend things. So Mark Ailes, Chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. I just wanted to add, thank the staff and say TAC is going to be discussing this further at our next meeting this Thursday at 9:30 a.m. hybrid in Kais Road as one of the agenda items. And I think we're all very happy to see how we can support staff and integrate some of the public communication, back and forth on that side. And I just want to also put a plug in for anybody who's online here and spread it to your neighbors. The special town meeting on the 19th, 27th, special ballot, I'm sorry, ballot. $27.5 million sounds like a lot, but right now we're borrowing the equivalent of $10 million and the roads are going downhill and we don't have safety. And if somebody before had said we were going to have $500,000 average a year just for safety, devoted things, people would say that's great. So that's what this includes. So everybody should go and support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are we set? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, that brings us to item 11 on our agenda, which is the discussion about APP 10, which we mentioned earlier, and Cameron.
Yep. Yeah. So thanks everybody. I think you see the document in the packet. We had a discussion on this back in late May, where there was some proposed changes that I think we talked through, and I incorporated some additional feedback into this most updated version. So there were a few items that I wanted to call out and highlight. So one is, thanks to Paul, I think he kind of pointed this out, that there's a question at the start, right? So at the very start, this policy refers to the select board and the town manager as the appointing authorities. I think there's a question is, should the policy also include the town moderator, as the town moderator is the appointing authority for the finance committee? So I don't know how the group feels about that.
Well, they do appoint FinCom. So-
Any appointing authority.
That's right.
Right,
Yeah, that's a good catch.
yeah.
Yep, sure. Okay.
So if we want to make that change, we certainly can, and there are actually a number of places in the document where it sort of flows through, because it refers oftentimes to the select board and the town manager, and so I'd have to go through and clean up that language to make sure it's consistent across the board.
Maybe what we should do is just refer to all three of them at the start, and then
Yeah.
for the
Correct.
appointing
Right.
authority for the
Right.
rest of
Yes, is
Yeah.
to define it as the appointing authority and then just
Yeah.
refer to it as the appointing authority throughout. So I just want to make sure that I can go through and update that and just make sure that it's consistent
That makes sense.
with that across. There was a second change, which is in section 3, adding that some committees may want to appoint co-chairs. So I think, Mary, that's something that you pointed out. So added language to that effect that
Okay.
just sort of allows that flexibility.
And when we had that discussion, we said probably committees of 5 or more. You didn't put it here, and I don't know if it needs to be here, but that's another comment. People have strong on that.
Yeah, I mean, the way I just left it was more flexible. So it just says certain committees may also find it desirable to elect co-chairs or a vice chair.
Yep.
So it just allows that flexibility where people want it. The third point was, I think, a point that you had made, Wendy, which was just, we talked about sort of either adding or dissolving a committee. And I think just adding some more specific language that says, committee dissolution would be based on fulfillment of committee charge or if work is no longer necessary. So that was just another add there to the document. And then really sort of the last thing was just to sort of highlight that there was some discussion in late May about sometimes appointing people for additional terms. And I think it was Mark and Mary, you had pointed out like there may, examples of some committees where people have accumulated knowledge or expertise.
Yep.
And so I went back and looked at it. I didn't make a change to it because it seemed to me that there is allowance for that in the language. So I just wasn't. I felt like it was covered.
I agree.
Okay.
I do.
It is.
Yeah.
So that because that flexibility does exist.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really, I mean, again, that was really it as far as new changes, beyond sort of what we had gone through and discussed in May. And then obviously there's the updated language that's all there in the packet.
I reread it and found it to be quite good and seemed to track well with my understanding of the process. I'm still a fan of going into section A, what is it, 6A, whatever, about the numbers 9 and 10, where we say that, where we establish the policy of limiting to 2 full consecutive terms for 3-year terms and 1 term for 5 years, and considering changing those to 3 full terms and 2 full terms. In other words,
Where specifically, I'm just trying to.
it's on page 5 of the policy is a section 8 under A, which is general. Section 8 is administrative policies and procedures, A, and then it's numbers 9 and 10 on the list under terms of office. We say except as provided in sections 8B, those appointed to 3-year terms as full member of a committee shall be limited to 2 full consecutive terms. And then the second one notes that 5 years will be 1.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so I hear you, Mark. I mean, the reason I didn't change it was because again, it says unless it's an except, like you can still do it. It's just, it's an exception. If you're saying, hey, I'm going to appoint somebody for more than 2 terms, you're saying I'm doing that because in section 8B, hey, because they've developed extensive and valuable background knowledge, because they have skills and expertise, et cetera.
Right, it's in B, it's in section B.
It's not automatic.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and what I'm getting at is that, the number of committees that I work with where we are really looking hard and don't have a stack of volunteer cards and need to find someone who's willing to serve. When sometimes there are people who would be willing to take on a 3rd term. Strikes me as being the more common thing. And I think that 8B could stand. It would just be then if somebody was talking about going beyond 3 terms or beyond 2 terms, if it was 5 years, then the same criteria would develop. So I'm talking about making it routinely possible for somebody to serve a 3rd or an additional term if they want to. But other than that would be my only suggestion for change to the.
I mean, I don't know how others feel about it. I mean, I think you and I, to me, I feel like I'm not wanting to set an expectation of 3 terms, that it certainly is available in there, where it needs to be used.
Yeah.
Cameron, I have a couple of suggestions here. On page 5, we were just talking about page 5. In the paragraph that starts, in accordance with the vote of Article 47, et cetera, all possible efforts to seek out candidates. And then the next paragraph says the select board and town manager shall make appointments. There's something missing there. What happens between seeking out candidates and making appointments? I think what happens is candidates are vetted and specific candidates agreed upon by the committee chair and the select board liaison. That seems to be missing. There's a gap between, let's look for candidates and then appointments. Oh, yeah,
It's covered elsewhere in this document.
you know, it's, I don't know, it just seems there's a gap there. Is it an important gap? I'm not sure, but sort of. It goes from looking
Yeah,
at candidates to making appointments, but in between that, there's important involvement.
Yeah. No, I hear you, Paul. I'm not, this is intended, this paragraph is more intended around the, making sure we are doing things that are treating people equally,
Right.
seeking out candidates and making appointments that are in accordance with, equal rights and, sort of a broad representation.
Yeah, it's appointment policy procedure. Look, is it your discretion with it, put that in there, not just seem lacking. And then, so there's talk in section on page 10. There's role of committee and appointments. I'm wondering, should that be committee chairs? Because later on, are the committees invite prospective members of the committee chairs? Or is there, I don't know what the answer is, but
Where are you, Paul?
I'm on page 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Page,
one.
page, it says role of committee and appointments.
Oh, I'm on-
Is it the role of the
Yeah,
committee or the committee
Yeah,
chair?
that's page 9.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, page,
Page
I'm
9.
sorry,
yeah, okay, page 9. I got it. Each committee is expected to encourage individuals, state qualifications, make suggestions.
yeah, I don't know if that's the role of the committee chair or the committees or,
Well, the committees generally discuss sort of.
okay.
And the committees do a lot of word of mouth as far as recruiting new members.
The role of the committee and appointments, so. I know vetting candidates.
So I see what you're saying, yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is to that, but I'm just pointing that out. And the last thing I want to point out is towards the end, you talk about ad hoc.
Well, sorry, on that one, Paul, I mean, you could, I don't think it would hurt to just say each committee and committee chair.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a little redundant, but I don't think that would hurt to just sort of call out both.
Yeah. And then, geez, I'm sorry, I don't know what page it is. You're talking about elected municipal officials. May not accept that elected officials may serve on, I think you should say working groups or task forces. Because you say temporary ad hoc committees, but specifically, the terms we use, I think, are working groups and task forces. That's the terms we're using now.
Sorry, where are you, Paul? I'm following along here. Which?
Eligibility for appointment.
And also, I want to add to that a select board member is a member of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, according to the town bylaws.
Yeah.
So that's an exception to this.
Yeah, it's all in that one item.
You see number 3?
Eligibility for appointment number 3.
Okay, I'm not eligible for appointment. Number 3, elected municipal officials.
Yep.
And so
Except
what?
when you're saying accept that, so you're saying that they're now eligible to serve on a committee, except that they may serve on temporary ad hoc committees. And Paul said we should change that language. And I'm saying we also have to add the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust.
I think it should say may serve on working groups or task forces, or in instances where bylaws,
Statutory committees.
yeah.
Statutory committees would work, yeah. Right.
Mine was more wording, yours is more substance. That's what I had.
And then, well, are you done, Paul? or should
Yeah,
I-
I'm done.
Okay, I got one. So you got that one, Cameron?
I do. Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
read back?
I just, what I got is working groups or task forces and statutory committees.
Think that covers it?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, I got one more thing. When you're talking about residency as eligibility for appointments, G residency, the only thing that comes to mind for me is on the Economic Vitality Committee. We sometimes appoint people that are business owners that are an important part of the business community, but they don't reside in Concord. So where it says, however, this should be relatively rare, I'm wondering if we could just strike that. And we can say that their experience supports the appointment of a non-resident, it would be beneficial to the committee's work. Cause
Yeah.
just take
Yep.
out, however, this should be relatively rare, just strike that.
Yep.
Okay, because they're important to the Economic Vitality Committee that we have non-residents.
Well, and it's also a little bit redundant, so.
Okay.
Meaning, I think it makes sense to take it out.
Right.
Hey, Cameron, thank you for doing all this. Your patience is legendary.
Okay, so the only one we didn't really decide on though is Mark and I have a difference of opinion on. I'm in the opinion of keep it at 2 terms, and there's a process there is an exception.
I actually support the 2 terms also,
Okay.
because we have an exception process. And it's
Alright.
achievement.
Yeah, I thought that we had the relatively rare language in the exception process.
No, I think we made a criteria.
No, actually, we might. I think you're right.
No, it was, and then
Is
we
it-
made a criteria.
Did
we take out the relatively rare thing, though?
I know what you mean.
I mean, I'll have to go back, but I mean, it's
No, it's
there's
in
still an
there.
exception process. I mean,
It's intended that reappointments under this section
Shall be
are
rare.
relatively rare.
They
Not
probably
even
still.
relatively rare, just rare.
Yep,
Well, I think that they are
Take it out.
relatively rare.
they are. I mean, yeah.
I mean,
Actually, are they?
I think so. I mean, in the last year, we've been challenging, yeah. I mean, I think we're all making an effort to bring in new
We are.
people and,
Yeah.
We
I
are.
mean,
We are.
it should stay there.
Okay, I just have a strong feeling one way or the
Okay.
other. I really don't.
Okay, so I've got a couple of changes here. Page 9, each committee and committee chair. A section on the working group or task forces and statutory committees, and then on residency striking. However, this should be relatively rare. And then adding the moderator and making sure the language is consistent throughout on appointing authority, which would include select board, town manager, and moderator as appropriate.
I think it's good to go.
So, yeah, I'm not hearing support for changing the number of the term limits, so we'll back off on that one and maybe put a clean copy in the next packet and we'll.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I can make those changes and certainly get that into the next packet,
Okay.
and hopefully that would be something we could agree to.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I guess that's the meeting. Okay, one more charge to address.
So moving on to the financial policy work group charge, you all have it in your packet. There've been just a couple minor changes. I did a little bit of an intro to the background, put a little context and as to why we're talking about the reserve funds as a focus. I also just want to point out, we did discuss adding the town financial advisor advice into this, and that's the 6th bullet down. There's a typo in here. It should be bond agency reports, not.
Yep.
bond agency.
That's okay.
Just comment. But other than that, this pretty much is the same as it was before, so.
Wendy, are you really gonna do all the financial policies?
No, so this actually calls out specifically that we're gonna pull out, we're gonna look at the policies and identify those of strategic importance. Our intention is not to rewrite that whole policy, but pull out the ones that we think are important. And then they'll be presented to the finance committee, board is brought to the select board for approval, and then the finance department will incorporate those into, but we're not taking on that whole
Yeah,
document at
because a
all.
lot of that stuff is very procedural.
It's very
Only used by
department
staff.
specific, right?
Okay, so you're gonna limit it to, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then
Yeah,
I'm fine with this.
Any other comments?
Make a motion?
Yeah.
All right, I move to approve the financial policy working group charge as indicated in the select board meeting packet.
Second.
Any further discussion? Think we need a roll call vote for that?
Mr. McKennitt,
Aye.
Mr. Bone,
Aye.
Ms. Ravelli, aye. Mr. Howard, Mr. Okay, Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
All right,
Okay.
okay, and then, we also have, some potential nominees for this committee that I'd like to, make a motion for.
Yep.
And just to talk about this, I did put myself in here as the nominee for the select board. Before we decided this would be a work group, we suggested that I would volunteer.
Yeah,
for this.
yeah, you're the person.
So I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
Right, so I'll make the following motion, to approve the Wendy Ravelli, 42 Bow Street, to the Financial Policy Work Group as a representative of the Select Board for a term to expire at the conclusion of the work outlined in the charge. Lois Wassoff, 258 Sudbury Road, to the Financial Policy Work Group as representative of the Finance Committee for a term to expire at the conclusion of the work outlined in the charge. Finally, Don Kupka, 39 Devon Street, to the Financial Policy Work Group as a representative of the Finance Committee for a term to expire at the conclusion of the work outlined in the charge.
Second.
Second, good.
All right.
Cameron got in there.
Okay, we need a roll call.
Yeah, and are we appointing or are we just?
We're nominating.
We're
We're
nominating.
nominating.
Is that gonna slow you guys down if you're not appointed?
It might, but we should follow our procedure.
Okay, I'm just
Okay,
saying,
we're doing the right
this
thing.
was,
All right, so,
I was for get together and get this done.
well, Finance Committee isn't being bound.
All right,
It's okay.
good.
All right, so we're gonna have a roll call. Cameron?
Aye.
All right, Mr. Bowen.
Aye.
Mr. Belli, aye. Mr. Howell.
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, so this will be a consent agenda item for next time too. Those appointments. Okay, do we have anything on liaison reports?
I have nothing more than what's in what was included in that.
I'm good.
We heard about my stuff through the MCI update, primarily was what's done on the last couple of weeks. Okay. So that, I think, brings us to the last item that we have on our agenda, which is an executive session. To consider purchase of land for real property. And so we're not going to return to open session for this, so the meeting will adjourn after the executive session without returning to open session and.
Make a motion. We move to enter into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A6 to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair elects that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of a public body and not to return to open session. Right, and we're going to take a roll call vote. Mr. McKenna.
Aye.
Mr. Bohm.
Aye.
Mr. Belli, aye. Mr. Howell.
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
Okay. Go into executive session.